Chapter 216. Chapter 216 of W.R. Comprehending the Mystery and Refining the Incarnation. The speed of time in the spirit space was not fixed at 730 times the speed of the untainted world. In fact, the speed of time in the spirit space was a relative speed. Its speed was relative to the space-time of the void Wuji Palace. That was to say, the speed of time in the spirit space should be 730 times that of the 18th layer of hell. However, this was only possible under the condition of slow time flow. For example, in the 18th layer of hell, the time flow was already billions of times faster than that of the untainted world, which had far exceeded the bearing capacity of the spirit space. Luo Fan carefully comprehended the minor kiliocosm inside the limitless palace. Through the performance of the minor kiliocosm, he had a deeper understanding of the mysteries of space-time. He even felt that the space-time distortion ability of his great sun golden eyes and bright moon silver eyes had strengthened a little. His mind left the spirit space and carefully comprehended the strange aura of the 18th layer of hell, which was like the beginning of the world and the end of the world. Luo Fan gradually understood the essence of the 18 layers of hell. As he understood this point, he suddenly felt that the tiny dots around him became extremely intimate. It seemed that he could control these tiny dots to form some kind of extremely powerful thing. Dark incarnation. With this intimate feeling, Luo Fan already knew where this feeling came from in the blink of an eye. He couldn't help murmuring. As he said this, all the tiny existences within a radius of thousands of feet around his body continued to gather and gradually condensed into a ball in front of him. Furthermore, it was constantly undergoing some sort of mysterious, indescribably wondrous compression, condensation, and transformation. After a while, he had already turned into a middle-aged man wearing a dark blue robe. He had a dignified face, and his appearance was somewhat similar to Luo Fan's. However, he contained a kind of tranquil aura that seemed to devour everything, and also seemed to contain everything. After the middle-aged man appeared, Luo Fan suddenly felt that he seemed to have a very strange body. At the same time, a vague feeling of controlling the entire 18 layers of hell appeared in his heart. As soon as this feeling appeared, Luo Fan instantly knew that this middle-aged man in front of him was one of his incarnations, a dark incarnation with the same characteristics as the Great Freedom Demon Master's dark incarnation. Although the appearance of this incarnation was completely different from the Great Freedom Demon Lord's incarnation of darkness, and even the aura it exuded was very different, the essence of the two was the same. They were both living beings condensed from the infinite darkness of the 18 levels of hell. They were born with the ability to control the 18 levels of hell, and they were born with all kinds of unfathomable abilities. With a thought, Luo Fan's body shook. Then he turned into a ray of light and rushed toward the middle-aged man in a dark cyan robe. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared into the middle-aged man's glabella, and then entered his sea of consciousness world through some mysterious mechanism. Naturally, there was a huge difference between the dark incarnation's sea of consciousness and Luo Fan's. The entire sea of consciousness world was extremely deep and dark, as if there was a vortex that swallowed everything, or a huge black hole. After entering the sea of consciousness world, Luo Fan did not stop. He directly rushed to the center of the black hole, sat cross-legged in the void, and closed his eyes. His mind was like his spirit in the sea of consciousness world, spreading out and instantly controlling the entire sea of consciousness world, and then the entire dark incarnation. In an instant, he seemed to have become the supreme god of the entire 18 levels of hell, and the endless small existences around him were like his people under his feet. The feeling of controlling the entire 18 levels of hell was more than 10 times more real than before. As long as he moved his mind, all the small existences within a radius of 10,000 miles would change according to his will, changing into tens of thousands of unimaginable mysterious structures. This incarnation is really amazing, and it's almost omnipotent in the 18 levels of hell. The vast heavenly demon master actually only developed such an innate magic. What a waste. Luo Fan carefully observed the power of the dark incarnation and could not help but sigh in his heart. With a slight thought, 18 halos that emitted 18 different kinds of light appear behind his head. These 18 halos were constantly changing. The outermost layer would suddenly become the innermost layer, and the innermost layer would suddenly become the second outermost layer, and so on and so forth. They were constantly changing, flickering, and changing. They seemed to be evolving the infinite space-time, great Tao, and had unimaginable power. This was Luo Fan's version of the 18 levels of hell. It seemed that there was a huge difference between the real 18 levels of hell and the magic power that the vast heavenly demon master had evolved. They seemed to be two completely different magic powers, and there was almost no connection between them. However, in fact, the power of Luo Fan's version of the 18 levels of hell was more powerful, and its essence was more in line with the 18 levels of hell. Moreover, because of the existence of the halos, it seemed more flexible, more varied, and more powerful. Each of the 18 halos was a world, and each represented a level of hell. If an enemy was sucked into the halos, they would continuously sink in the rotation of the worlds, and finally completely sink in the endless time of the 18 levels of hell. In the end, their power would completely dissipate, and their souls would collapse. Thus, the effect of destroying the enemy was achieved. It was a pity that this magic power was born with the dark incarnation. Even with Luo Fan's cultivation realm, if he used this magic power on his own body, the power would probably be far less than 1/10,000th of the dark incarnation's power. It could be said that it was quite limited. With a slight thought, a piece of fire attribute, chaotic origin essence that was 300 meters in diameter flew out of his sleeve and floated in front of him. Just as the countless tiny existences in the surroundings were about to pounce on the fire attribute, chaotic origin essence, to extract its power, the 18 halos behind the dark incarnation's head quickly shook, and the fire attribute, chaotic origin essence was sucked into the halos. As the fire attribute, chaotic origin essence entered, Luo Fan's consciousness also entered the halos, moving along with the fire attribute, chaotic origin essence. He carefully observed the process of the changes in the 18 worlds that the fire attribute, chaotic origin essence had opened up in the halos. He watched this huge piece of primordial essence move from world to world, watched its energy being extracted, and watched its materials being devoured. Half a day had passed in the outside world, but this fire attribute, chaotic origin essence seemed to have gone through tens of thousands of years. At a certain moment, Luo Fan's heart moved, and the halos behind his head shook again. Then, a fist-sized rock was spat out from the halos and floated in front of the dark incarnation. This was the remnant of the fire attribute, chaotic origin essence, after its power was extracted by the 18 levels of hell. This was a rock that even the 18 levels of hell couldn't erode. This rock didn't contain any energy, and its material composition was extremely pure. It was an extremely sturdy material that repelled all energy and was incompatible with any material. When this rock appeared, the incomparably dense, tiny existences in the 18 levels of hell swarmed over and instantly drowned the rock. They frantically attacked the rock and produced an extremely strong suction force, trying their best to extract all the energy in this rock and corrode everything that could be corroded. However, after a long while, there was still no change to the rock. It was still as complete as before, and still as stable as before. Luo Fan's eyes lit up. This rock wasn't compatible with any energy, and its material composition was too stable, so it couldn't be refined into a Dharma treasure or even a Dharma artifact. However, this characteristic of the 18 levels of hell that couldn't erode, it made it an extremely rare treasure. It could be said that the most precious thing in the entire Martian chaotic origin essence was this rock. Although he still didn't know what use this rock had, he raised his hand and put this precious rock into his universe in his sleeve. With a thought from Luo Fan, the darkness incarnation raised its hand and grabbed at the air. A black divine dragon that was tens of thousands of feet long formed in the void. Although this black divine dragon was formed from the endless tiny existences in this hell, its body was as solid as real flesh and blood. The scales on its body were all the same, and the distribution of the scales contained some kind of mysterious mystery. The entire divine dragon was extremely mighty, and the light in its eyes was clear, revealing a kind of indescribable agility. Obviously, it had a rather complete spiritual sense. The moment the divine dragon formed, it let out an incomparably majestic dragon roar. Its voice spread far and wide, causing the entire dark hell to tremble. The tiny existences that were originally very evenly distributed distanced themselves from the black divine dragon's body as if they had met their natural enemy. They gave up an empty space with a radius of nearly 1,000 feet around the black divine dragon's body. After the divine dragon let out a dragon roar, it suddenly lifted its head and used its head to support the darkness incarnation's legs. With a swing of its body, it carried Luo Fan's darkness incarnation and swam in the direction where the faint blood-colored light was coming from. The black divine dragon swam at an extremely fast speed. The way it swam was even more mysterious. It drew an incomparably mysterious trajectory in midair, and in the blink of an eye, it had already arrived at the source of the blood-colored light. Here, the all-encompassing blood-colored light dispelled the incomparably deep darkness of the 18 levels of hell. Chapter 217. Space-Time Seal, boundless sea of blood. After arriving here and seeing the scene below that was completely different from the 18 layers of hell, Luo Fan no longer had the idea of continuing to test the power of the Dark Incarnation. The body of the Dark Incarnation shook, and a mysterious light rushed out of the Niwen Palace between his eyebrows. Then it fell and condensed, and it had already turned into Luo Fan in a dark green robe. After Luo Fan's body appeared, he did not stop at all. He turned his hands slightly, looked at the void, and made a grasping motion. His mind moved slightly, and as the spiritual power in his body flowed, there were endless three-dimensional talismans flashing in the void. These three-dimensional talismans were tiny like specks of dust, and they covered the heavens and the earth. As soon as they appeared, they formed an extremely strange structure. It was like a giant hand, and it completely sealed the space in an area of 300,000 m around the Divine Black Dragon and the Divine Black Dragon. It formed a complete silken cocoon. Although the tiny existences that filled the 18 layers of hell could absorb all energy and all light, that was only for ordinary energy. For Luo Fan, who was familiar with the mysteries of the 18 layers of hell, it was not impossible to change the way the energy operated so that these tiny light spots could not be absorbed or devoured. And the silk cocoon formed by these three-dimensional talismans was this kind of energy after the change. The endless tiny existences around constantly attacked the silk cocoon, constantly wearing down the three-dimensional talismans, but it did not produce the slightest effect. The silk cocoon formed by the tiny dust-like three-dimensional talismans spun wildly, instantly cutting the space-time, forming a huge space-time seal, and it was shrinking at a very fast speed. As it shrank, the Dark Incarnation and the Black Divine Dragon in the sealed space gradually shrank, and they were constantly compressed. In the blink of an eye, the seal had turned into a fist-sized ball. Mysterious light flowed on it, as if there was a complete world contained in it. A silver light flashed in Luo Fan's right eye, and the time and space in front of him distorted. The small black ball in front of him charged straight into his left pupil, instantly dyeing the silver pupil of his left eye black. This seal was a kind of space-time seal that sealed the space-time. What it sealed was the space within 100,000 feet of the 18th layer of hell. The Dark Incarnation, however, needed the environment of hell to complement it in order to unleash its ultimate power. If he had time in the future, Luo Fan would be able to refine this sealed space-time and turn it into an auxiliary magic tool. When he unfolded it, he would be able to simulate the environment of the 18th layer of hell, allowing the Dark Incarnation to push its power to its peak even in the outside world. but that would have to be in the future. Right now, Luo Fan could only rely on the bright moon's silver pupil's ability to distort time and space to suppress the seal and maintain the integrity of the seal. Only then would the seal not collapse due to the change in time and space within it. Thus, he sealed it into his bright moon silver pupil. After sealing this space-time seal in his right eye, Luo Fan instantly felt that his bright moon silver pupil had been completely sealed. When he used it, it no longer had the power it had before. Knowing that this was the state that happened when the power of the bright moon silver pupil was used to suppress the space-time seal, Luo Fan was not surprised. Instead, he raised his hand and pointed at his left eye. A layer of black fog appeared in his left eye and instantly sealed his great sun golden pupil. Without the bright moon's silver pupil, the power of the great sun golden pupil was greatly reduced. It was better to take this opportunity to seal his eyes and reduce his reliance on them. After doing all of this, Luo Fan's eyes spun, and he no longer had the feeling of seeing through everything. However, the feeling of seeing through the surface allowed him to feel another kind of comprehension that was different from seeing through everything. After a long time, Luo Fan turned his attention to the endless blood-red light in front of him. This blood-red light was emitted by a boundless sea of blood. This sea of blood covered the sky and covered the earth. It was incomparably wide and covered all directions. The blood-red light that it emitted was tough and condensed. It contained an extremely profound mystery and was unbreakable. Even the tiny existences that filled the 18 levels of hell could not break the integrity of this blood-red light. They could not absorb even a trace of the blood-red light. Luo Fan raised his hand and grabbed the air. Within a radius of several feet, strands of blood-red light condensed and appeared in his hand. Although this blood-red light was only an illusion, but for a cultivator of Luo Fan's level of cultivation, the difference between illusion and reality was already extremely small. It was normal for him to grasp this kind of incorporeal body as if it were real, carefully caressing this seemingly real but actually illusory blood-red light. A feeling similar to touching jelly appeared in his heart. He almost had an impulse to not let go of it. This blood-red light was extremely condensed, just like real blood. However, it did not have any stench or filth. It was like an extremely pure blood jade, crystal clear. Light flowed in it, as if there were countless kinds of faint light and shadows flashing in it. Raising his hand to disperse this trace of blood-red light, Luo Fan took a step and came to the surface of the sea of blood. As he entered the area covered by the blood-red light, the moment he left the incomparably deep darkness of the 18 levels of hell, Luo Fan felt that he had broken through the original time and space and arrived at a completely different time and space. His mind, which was originally sluggish, returned to its original state of incomparably fast and lightning-like speed. With a thought, his mind went deep into the world of his sea of consciousness. Through the void of the Wuji Palace beside his spine, he sensed the spirit space. In an instant, he found that the flow of time in the spirit space had returned to the previous state. The whole process no longer felt that time was stagnant. The wind blew the grass grew, and the birds flew. Everything was extremely smooth. As soon as Luo Fan saw this, he knew that he had stepped out of the 18 levels of hell. And here was probably the end of the untainted land, the place that corresponded to the endless starry sky above the untainted land. He sent out his perception to incorporate the sea of blood into his mind. In an instant, a feeling similar to that of being under the endless starry sky came into his heart. The boundless sea of blood below was like the endless starry sky above the untainted land. No matter how he magnified or reduced his perception, he could see the end of the sea of blood. But no matter how he enhanced his perception, he could not perceive the scene outside the end of the sea of blood. This feeling was so similar to the feeling when facing the endless starry sky. Dispelling the sigh in his heart, Luo Fan raised his hand and grabbed in the air. In the sea of blood below, a large mass of blood with a diameter of 100 feet floated up. In the blink of an eye, it had already arrived in front of him. Taking a closer look, Luo Fan was slightly shocked. He saw that the blood was clear and pure, like a piece of top-grade blood jade. However, there were countless tiny shadows constantly flashing within it. These shadows contained countless sceneries, including endless mountains and rivers, deserts and swamps, as well as all kinds of beasts hunting prey, all kinds of plants growing, and all kinds of life forms feeding each other. There were all kinds of changes, and it was all-encompassing. It was as if this pool of blood contained a complete world, an endless heaven and earth, and an endless life force. Luo Fan raised his hand and gently wiped it. This mass of blood water, with a diameter of 100 feet, constantly twisted and changed, forming one mysterious and wonderful shape after another. After a long while, after experimenting with hundreds of thousands of forms, Luo Fan finally let out a long breath. He raised his hand and scattered the large mass of blood, turning it into countless water droplets that poured down like rain, returning to the sea of blood. Through the experiment just now and his powerful senses, he had already understood the mysteries of the structure of the sea of blood. The sea of blood contained all the heavy, turbid, and energy in the entire chaos world. The entire sea of blood seemed to be formed from endless blood, but in reality, it was only formed from the condensed essence of countless heavy, turbid, and negative energies. The seemingly clear, pure, and even somewhat resplendent blood jade was actually formed from the condensation of countless types of energy. The heterogeneity within it had reached a limit. If one were to seriously divide it, there were probably hundreds of millions of types of energy within it. It was precisely because its structure was so complicated that it could evolve such complicated shadows under the special rules of the sea of blood. After he understood all of this, Luo Fan knew that if he stepped into the depths of the sea of blood, he would enter an illusion that possessed a boundless world, and he would transform into one of the shadows within the boundless shadows within the sea of blood. Only when he completely comprehended the various energies within the sea of blood and comprehended the profundities of these illusions would he be able to escape. These shadows, these worlds, were like the endless stars within the endless starry sky. They were endless in number and contained endless mysteries. After understanding this, Luo Fan also understood why the vast heavenly devil lord wanted to come to the sea of blood. This was definitely a treasure place to cultivate the illusory Tao. The endless shadows within the sea of blood seemed illusory yet real, but they contained endless mysteries of the illusion. If the vast heavenly devil lord came here to comprehend these shadows, his cultivation would definitely improve several times faster than before. Thinking of this, Luo Fan's mood was rather heavy. Although he had pursued the vast heavenly devil lord so closely that he could only change his position and leave the sea of blood, the sea of blood was distributed under the entire chaos world. As long as he kept going down, he would be able to enter the sea of blood in the end. If the vast heavenly devil lord did not give up on entering the sea of blood to comprehend its mysteries, he would have countless opportunities to enter the sea of blood in the next 30,000 years. Even if he waited here at all times, it would be impossible for him to guard against it. What should I do? Luo Fan frowned. He was in a dilemma. After a long time, he sighed and said softly, Forget it. Since I can't stop him from comprehending the sea of blood, I'll first thoroughly comprehend the sea of blood. As long as my comprehension of the sea of blood is stronger than the vast heavenly devil lords, I'll never have to fear his comprehension of the sea of blood. After saying that, he did not hesitate at all. Chapter 218. Turning false into true, boundless universe. Luo Fan's figure slammed into the sea of blood and instantly felt as if he had broken through some unfathomable barrier. In the blink of an eye, he had already arrived at a whole new world. It was a world that seemed illusory yet real, filled with a faint blood-red light. There was no end to it, and there was nothing but nothingness in all directions. After arriving in this world, Luo Fan's body instantly underwent some very strange changes. This change was not small, and could even be said to be earth-shattering. If it was normal, It should have been very easy for Luo Fan to detect it. However, the strangeness of this change was that after a dozen breaths of time, Luo Fan actually discovered that his body had undergone a change. How can this be? My body has returned to the body of an ordinary person on Earth in my previous life. Luo Fan was shocked. Although it was not to the extent of being horrified, it was difficult for him to remain calm. This body, Luo Fan was too familiar with. Although he had lost this body tens of thousands of years ago, the familiarity that was engraved in the depths of his soul was still something that he could not ignore. This was the body that he had watched grow up and on Earth. It was precisely because of this familiarity with the body that he had watched grow up and used for more than 20 years that he almost instinctively felt that this body was his and did not think in the direction that his body had changed. It was also because of this that he discovered the fact that his body had changed after a while. As Luo Fan felt the changes in his body, the world around him that was filled with a faint blood-red light suddenly underwent an earth-shattering change. In the blink of an eye, a large piece of land was laid out under his feet, and countless tall buildings rose from the ground. Countless fashionably dressed men and women appeared between the tall buildings in the blink of an eye, and all kinds of vehicles suddenly appeared out of thin air on the main road. An extremely noisy and complicated city scene appeared in front of him in the blink of an eye. In the sky above his head, the wind and clouds moved, and the sun emitted a scorching heat and dazzling light that illuminated the earth. The hustle and bustle of voices poured into Luo Fan's ears from all directions. An incomparably familiar and nostalgic feeling appeared in his heart. This was the boundless blood sea. This was something that Luo Fan was still extremely certain of. He did not feel that his thoughts were being distorted or his memories were being deceived. However, this entire world was exactly the same as the world he had lived in for the first 20 years of his life. Whether it was the gravity, the air, the buildings, the aura, the population, and so on, they were all remarkably similar to Earth. And this was obviously impossible. Motherf asterisk her. Even if you want to die, don't harm me. At this moment, a sudden breaking sound was heard, followed by an exasperated shout that poured into Luo Fan's ears. Luo Fan looked back and saw a truck parked horizontally behind him. A bald, strong man with a fierce face was shouting at Luo Fan in exasperation. His heart skipped a beat, and only then did he realize that he was actually standing in the middle of the road in a daze. Although he understood the man's feelings, it did not mean that he was willing to endure the man's shouts. Therefore, he frowned and his eyes narrowed. Right now, although he only had the body of an ordinary person, his memory was not distorted or affected. Naturally, his cultivation level was not affected. Therefore, as soon as his expression changed, an extremely strong will appeared out of thin air and directly acted on the bald man's body. The bald, strong man felt the pressure of this will, and an incomparably deep despair suddenly appeared in the deepest part of his heart. It was as if the entire world was pressing down on him, as if he could turn into minced meat in the next moment. Cold sweat instantly soaked his clothes, and his face paled as his body trembled. Luo Fan naturally would not argue with this strong man too much. After teaching him a little lesson, he walked away. He was far too curious about this world, and right now, it was more important to understand the mysteries of this world. This world was definitely not real, but he couldn't see any signs of it being fake. Even the strong man, just now, even though he was under the pressure of his will, had a reaction that a normal person should have. It was as if he was a normal person with a complete spiritual consciousness. However, it was completely different from any illusion that Luo Fan knew of. Looking at the characteristics of the buildings on the side of the road, Luo Fan already knew that this city was the one he was most familiar with. However, he had never been to this place before. In other words, this place was not any place in his memory. This place was not the light and shadow that he had moved out from his memory. This world, what kind of secrets does it have? Sensing this, Luo Fan's expression became even more thoughtful. He did not use any special methods to increase his speed. Although his body was only that of a normal person, As long as he was willing, there were countless ways for him to move a few miles in one step. He walked slowly on the side of the road, exerting his five senses to the limit. He absorbed all kinds of sounds, sights, smells, tactile sensations that were far beyond the range of a normal person's perception. These senses did not exceed the limits of a normal person's perception. The reason why he could have senses that were 10 times better than normal persons was because he had isolated all kinds of noises that could blind a normal person's senses. Through these senses, Luo Fan carefully analyzed the truth of this world. The more he analyzed, the more he was in awe. At this moment, he was already convinced that this world was a similar world to reality. It was a world that was built on an illusion, but it was completely built according to the rules of reality, according to the composition of the real world. If one ignored its essence and only looked at everything in this world, and only looked at every living thing in this world, one would feel that this world was absolutely real. Every single person he met had a complete spiritual sense and had their own emotions, turning illusion into reality. If I can understand the mystery, it will definitely improve my illusory cultivation. Luo Fan sighed in his heart. The illusory way was the essence of the illusory array volume in the Tao fruit scripture. Its improvement could not only allow Luo Fan to have the ability to restrain the vast freedom Devil Master, but it also had countless benefits for the improvement of his own cultivation realm. The endless light and shadows and the boundless sea of blood were the manifestation of the sea of blood's innate ability to develop infinite mysteries. The reason why there were endless and intermittent light and shadows was because there was no soul sense to guide them, or rather, there was no structural template. It was precisely because there was no template that the boundless sea of blood could only rely on the mysterious connection between it and the primordial world to continuously absorb the spiritual senses emitted by the countless living beings in the primordial world. It sought their memories and used their worldview to build such a world that turned the fake into the real. The untainted world had been established for less than 3 yuan Wei. Among them, there were countless Khanate gods with complete soul sense born everywhere in the untainted world. However, even the strongest of these Khanate gods was only at the level of Tao fruit like Luo Fan. With such a cultivation realm, compared to the boundless and unfathomable untainted world, he was as small as an ant. Not to mention that most Khanate gods were muddle-headed. They only knew how to instinctively absorb the chaos essence, Qi, to strengthen themselves and improve their soul sense. Therefore, in the untainted world, other than Luo Fan, the Khanate gods who had the deepest understanding of the world only knew the world within a radius of hundreds of millions of miles around them. This kind of knowledge was not enough for them to build a complete worldview. The boundless sea of blood sought their memories and used the knowledge of these Khanate gods to build this world that turned illusion into reality. Naturally, it could only obtain fragments. However, Luo Fan was different. Not to mention that in this life, Luo Fan had consciously searched for the mysteries of the untainted world and had a rough understanding of the structure of the untainted world. In his previous life, when he was an ordinary person, Earth was in an era of information explosion. Even if he did not consciously study it, it was enough for him to have an extremely clear understanding of the Earth that he lived on and the universe that Earth was in through occasional unintentional understanding. Earth, the 9 planets of the solar system, the billions of stars in the Milky Way, and the billions of extragalactic systems. The world built by such a complete system was the limit of what the boundless sea of blood could evolve. Luo Fan threw himself into the boundless sea of blood alone, which was equivalent to opening up his memories for the sea of blood to seek. Under the effect of some mysterious rules, the sea of blood would work hard to build the world that turned illusion into reality according to the most complete worldview that it could obtain. In the end, it chose Luo Fan's worldview. Luo Fan looked up at the sky. With the help of his cultivation realm at the peak of the earth immortal Tao fruit, his gaze pierced through the blue sky and saw the starry sky outside the sun in the blink of an eye. In the pitch-black sky, stars appeared one after another in the vast expanse of nothingness. These stars gradually formed all kinds of unfathomable and mysterious patterns. They seemed to have no rules and were just random decorations, but also seemed to be evolving some kind of profound mystery. As soon as Luo Fan saw it, he knew that this was the appearance of the world that was evolving. Although he did not know the true mystery of the Sea of Blood, through these appearances, Luo Fan also knew that this world that turned illusion into reality was rapidly becoming complete. Feeling this, a faint uneasiness surfaced in his heart. It seems that I should speed up. If this continues, it will be troublesome to leave this world when this world is completely complete. Luo Fan thought to himself. Chapter 219. Revisit family ties. Bloodlight turns into stars, although there were countless things in this world that were not in Luo Fan's memories. This world, this universe, after all, had been developed from his worldview by the boundless sea of blood. Therefore, in this world, he would definitely be able to find many things that he was familiar with, for example, his family, friends, and the environment he had lived in. If Luo Fan wanted to understand the truth of this world and understand the mysteries of the evolution of this world, the best way was to compare the things he was familiar with these things that he didn't have in his memory, and understand through the differences between them. And with that faint uneasiness in his heart, Luo Fan was no longer in the mood to continue walking leisurely. With a thought, under the control of his superb cultivation realm, an incomparably powerful will was emitted from his body, directly affecting the void around him. The void had a limit to the amount of power it could withstand. Under the effect of his will, it produced a strong distortion. In a trance, his figure disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already in the district that he was most familiar with, in front of the door that he was most familiar with in the district. "Little Fan, you're back. Wash your hands and eat." As soon as he opened the door, he saw his mother coming up to him, speaking in a very familiar and very nostalgic voice. Luo Fan's heart trembled. How long had it been since he had heard this familiar care? Was it 100,000 years or 1,000,000 years? Even though his heart was extremely tough, even though he knew that these things in front of him were only natural evolutions of the boundless sea of blood and not the same things in his memories, even though he knew that this mother before him was not the mother in his memories, he could not help but feel a sourness in his heart. "Mother!" His mouth moved, and Luo Fan finally called out. Wasn't his life's pursuit, his constant pursuit of the great Tao, also that he could see his family again one day? Wasn't it all for the sake of hearing this sentence from his mother? At this moment, the scene of his dreams appeared in front of him. Even though he knew that it was all fake, he could not help but want to relive this feeling. "What are you spacing out for? Wash your hands and eat." His mother gently scolded him with a smile. What happened next was very natural. His father, brother, and girlfriend returned one after another. After the family had a joyful meal, Luo Fan knew that if he continued to indulge in it, he would really sink into it. He could only sigh and ignore his lover's persuasion. With a turn of his body, he disappeared from these seemingly real and fake relatives. When he reappeared, he had already arrived at a place that he had seen many times from afar, but had never actually been to. No matter who it was, there were many places like this, moving from familiarity to unfamiliarity, moving from things in one's memory to things outside of one's memory. This was more beneficial and easier for one to comprehend the mysteries of this world. Looking up at the sky, Luo Fan felt slightly relieved when he saw the endless stars that were constantly evolving in the pitch-black void of the universe through the sky that was covered by the sunlight. The speed at which the boundless sea of blood evolved into a world was extremely fast. Even the evolution of the entire Earth was completed in less than a breath's time. However, in Luo Fan's worldview, the universe was just too vast. Every star in the sky was surrounded by several or even dozens of planets. These were several or even dozens of worlds. Even a barren and lifeless planet was still a world, just a barren world. There were billions of trillions of stars in the void of the universe. Even if a planet or a world could evolve in an instant, it would still take a very long time to complete the evolution of the entire universe. In fact, The delay of Emil's time did not affect the evolution of the entire universe at all. Knowing that there was still a lot of time, Luo Fan calmed his mind and carefully examined the process of the things that he was familiar with turning into something that he was unfamiliar with. Although his five senses were only at the level of an ordinary person, under the control of his superb cultivation realm, these ordinary senses could unleash superhuman effects, allowing him to receive information that far surpassed that of an ordinary person. The things that Luo Fan was familiar with were directly moved out from his memory. He was absolutely certain of this. However, the things that he was unfamiliar with, or even things that did not exist in his memory, were evolved from the boundless sea of blood according to the world view in Luo Fan's memory. Through this natural evolution in his memory, he could naturally understand the mystery of how the boundless sea of blood evolved into the universe. And he could also comprehend the mysteries of the boundless sea of blood. An incomparably deep light flashed in his eyes. All sorts of information that Luo Fan's five senses received flowed into his mind. The appearances of those things were gradually stripped away by him. The various illusions that covered up the truth were also becoming less and less. Luo Fan's figure did not move at all. He stood there quietly. As the days and years passed, the surrounding environment gradually changed. The mortals, buildings, and objects gradually changed. An ordinary person stood by the side of the road, motionless like a statue, but his eyes shone brightly, displaying a state of mind that surpassed that of an ordinary person. This did not attract attention at first, but as time passed, it naturally attracted the attention of others. As a result, more and more people gathered. There were even doctors, police, and even people from the Special Task Force. However, no one could move Luo Fan's figure, and no one could affect Luo Fan. At this time, Luo Fan wanted to exhaust the mysteries of this world, but he treated everything as nothingness. The various people who came to deal with him because he stood there motionless were compared with the knowledge in his memory. Through this difference, he saw the essence of this world clearly. Day after day, month after month, year after year, as time passed, he gradually felt that he was getting closer and closer to the essence of this world. One day, after 36 years, Luo Fan's mind suddenly moved, and an indescribable understanding emerged in his heart. Then, his body, which was as thin as a skeleton, suddenly changed. The body of an ordinary person in his previous life had turned into the innate Taoism body that he had cultivated in the blink of an eye. The magic power in his body, his super-perception, his soul, his sea of consciousness, and all kinds of magic treasures all returned in an instant. In the blink of an eye, he regained everything he had cultivated after coming to the untainted world. As his magic power recovered, his body shook, and his figure rose at an extremely fast speed. In the blink of an eye, he had already left Earth, turned into a long rainbow, and rushed straight into the depths of the distant universe. In this cosmic void, the flying speed of a long rainbow he had incarnated far exceeded the speed of flying in the untainted world. It was even faster than the speed of moving the void in the spirit kiliacosm. In the universe, he left an afterimage that was tens of thousands of miles long. In the blink of an eye, he had already left the solar system. The afterimage that was created because of his excessive speed extended straight out, and its target was the countless stars that were constantly evolving and forming in the depths of the universe. He had spent 36 years on Earth, and he had gradually approached the essence of this world. But he was only close. If he wanted to truly understand the mysteries of the evolution of this world, he had to personally go to the front line of the evolution of the world and understand the specific process of the evolution of the stars. After his magic power recovered, Luo Fan's perception and comprehension ability were many times stronger than before, and the things he understood were also many times more than when he had just entered this world. Although he had stood in that position for 36 years, and although the evolution of a star could be completely evolved in an instant, at this time, the countless stars in the entire universe were still evolving. Even the entire Milky Way had not yet completed its evolution. Therefore, If Luo Fan wanted to understand the specific process of formation and evolution, there were still countless opportunities. Although Luo Fan's flying speed was faster than the speed of moving the void, the boundless sea of blood's evolution speed was extremely terrifying after all. Therefore, it took him a full year to catch up to the position where the boundless sea of blood was evolving into a star. He finally saw the process of the stars being evolved from nothingness one after another. In the pitch black and empty cosmic void, a spot of blood light suddenly appeared. Then, in almost a billionth of an instant, this spot of blood light turned into a star that emitted infinite light and heat. After another turn, several or even dozens of planets appeared around this star. And all kinds of things on those planets appeared almost at the same time. The entire process was very smooth. The process was short and unbelievably natural, and the process of its construction was extremely mysterious. It was as if these stars and planets had been directly moved from another world into this cosmic void. Luo Fan slowed down a little, and slowed down to the same speed as the boundless sea of blood's evolution of the stars. He unleashed his senses to the limit, and the evolution process of the stars was continuously included in his mind. The entire evolution process was too short, so short that Luo Fan could not sense all the changes in an instant. In order to understand its mysteries, he could only accumulate the evolution of countless stars, and use his understanding of the mysteries of the evolution of each star to make up for the evolution process, one after another. The evolution of the stars flowed through his mind. Gradually, Luo Fan entered a state where there was no one around him. The only thing he could see in his eyes was the ball of bloody light that was gently rotating. The endless mysteries contained in that rotation were gradually revealed in front of him. Chapter 220. True and false seamless. Void shift as he gradually completed the complicated changes contained in the blood-red light's gentle rotation. Luo Fan gradually discovered the incredible mystery contained in this rotation. He did not know the passage of time in the state of selflessness. In the blink of an eye, 100 years had passed. On a certain day, 100 years after Luo Fan entered the state of selflessness, Luo Fan suddenly had an epiphany as if he had woken up from the deepest part of his sleep. As this epiphany occurred, an indescribable feeling appeared in his mind. It was as if the evolving stars would collapse again with a single thought and return to the blood-red light. With this feeling, Luo Fan knew that he had understood the mystery of the rotation of the blood-red light. He moved his mind. As expected, as he moved, the rotation of the blood-red light that had appeared out of nowhere suddenly stopped. The evolving stars lost their chance to take shape and returned to the blood-red light. Success. I see. Luo Fan's heart was filled with boundless joy. After spending over 130 years, he had finally achieved something at this moment. The mystery of the boundless sea of blood evolving into a world had finally been lifted a little in front of him. With the first time, everything else naturally fell into place. With a thought from Luo Fan, the evolving stars that he had experienced over the past 100 years rapidly collapsed one after another. In the blink of an eye, they once again turned into balls of blood-red light. These balls of blood-red light floated in the pitch-black void of the universe and continuously gathered towards where Luo Fan was. At the same time, the pitch-black cosmic void also gradually collapsed, turning into a faint bloody light. It continued to gather and condense, attaching itself to the bloody light formed by the stars, piling up around Luo Fan's body. It was easy to destroy, but difficult to create. It had been over 130 years since the beginning of the universe's appearance until now. At this point, it had only barely completed the evolution of the Milky Way. However, as the universe collapsed, the stars returned to the blood-red light, and the void returned to the sea of blood. As the universe collapsed, Luo Fan's figure arrived at the beginning of the universe's evolution, which was above the Earth that he was most familiar with. Less than a day had passed. When he returned to the sky above the Earth, The endless blood-red light formed by the stars had already covered the entire universe. The Earth that he was most familiar with was floating alone in the endless blood-red light. Standing in the remaining void, Luo Fan looked down at the various scenes that he was both familiar with and unfamiliar with. He let out a long sigh in his heart. Without any hesitation, he raised his hand and waved it gently. The Earth that he was extremely familiar with collapsed with a loud bang. In the blink of an eye, it had turned into a sparkling and translucent blood-red light. It merged into the endless blood-red light that covered the sky. As the blood-red light merged into the world, the entire blood-red sky instantly underwent an incomparably huge change. The blood-red light that formed the sky suddenly condensed and turned into endless blood-red water in the blink of an eye. It made Luo Fan's figure seem to be in the blood-red seawater. However, the blood-red seawater seemed especially pure, crystal clear, and translucent. It was like an extremely mysterious blood-red crystal. At this moment, the endless light that had been flashing in the blood-red water before Luo Fan entered had completely disappeared. Standing in the sea of blood, he carefully sensed it and discovered that there were countless strands of strange rule threads buried in an extremely deep and obscure location within the blood-red water. These rule threads had some kind of extremely mysterious and unfathomable connection with the entire primordial world. It seemed to be connected to the quintessence of the entire primordial world, and it contained the source of everything in the world. With a slight jolt of his heart, Luo Fan instantly knew that this was the true secret of the boundless sea of blood. It was the true source of the reason why the boundless sea of blood was able to condense all the and heavy and turbid energy of the primordial world here and produce such an effect that could turn fake into real and evolve a world. If he could comprehend this secret, he would be able to create his own sea of blood and possess a world that could evolve at any time. He would be able to set up an illusion according to his opponent's memories and the weakness of his opponent's mind at any time. In the end, he would easily pull his opponent into the abyss of oblivion and defeat him easily. Unfortunately, the profundities involved were deep and complicated to an unimaginable extent. Even if Luo Fan, who had attained the peak of the earthly immortal Tao fruit, exhausted all his efforts, he would probably only be able to slightly sense that this secret existed within the blood-red water. He could only sense that this secret was not an illusion, but was real. It was utterly impossible to truly comprehend the secret within it. Attaining the earthly immortal Tao fruit was a proof of one's life essence and a sublimation. Those that were able to attain the earthly immortal Tao fruit naturally knew where their limits were. So as soon as he sensed the existence of this secret, Luo Fan knew that this secret had already far exceeded the scope of his ability. If his attainments in the Tao didn't improve qualitatively, then even if he stayed within the sea of blood for tens of millions of years or 1,000,000,000,000 years, it would probably be difficult for him to comprehend a fraction of this secret. When he understood this, Luo Fan couldn't help but sigh in his heart. However, this sigh only continued for a short moment before it was lightly put down by him. Even though he didn't know the true secret of the Sea of Blood, he'd already obtained an extremely enormous gain from knowing the secret of the Sea of Blood turning fake into real and evolving a world, and he'd already achieved the goal of Luo Fan personally entering the Sea of Blood this time. Understanding this secret didn't just allow his grasp of the illusory formation scroll of the Tao Fruit's Tao scripture to practically improve qualitatively. It allowed him to not be deceived by any illusion that was lower than the illusory formation scroll of the Tao Fruit's Tao scripture. And it even allowed him to obtain an unbelievable ability, an ability that was originally impossible for him to obtain at this cultivation realm. Void teleportation. In Luo Fan's previous understanding, no matter what method he used, he would need to use it on space to teleport. He would either tear space, distort space, or fold space, and so on. The stability and strength of the space of the primordial world had already reached the limit of Luo Fan's imagination. At that moment, Luo Fan had already cultivated to the peak of the Earth Immortal Tao fruit and already had the qualifications to seek the Primordial Unity Tao fruit. However, even if he used countless Dharma treasures to increase his strength, unleashed all his Dharma powers, and used the strongest mystical ability, he could at most distort the space of the primordial world slightly. The space-time in the endless starry sky and the 18 levels of hell had already changed. It was different from the primordial world. The stability of the space was far less than that of the primordial world. Therefore, it was possible to teleport. Therefore, with Luo Fan's current cultivation realm, it was just a delusion if he wanted to teleport in the primordial world. This time, after raising his illusory Tao cultivation to the realm of turning fake into real. However, Luo Fan discovered that there was another way to teleport. At that moment, Luo Fan's heart moved slightly. He raised his hand and waved it gently in front of him. In an instant, a very ordinary stone door that was only 15 feet tall and 10 feet wide appeared in front of him. This was a stone door that was created from the fake and had already turned fake into real. He raised his hand and pushed the stone door open. Without hesitation, he stepped in. As he stepped in, the stone door distorted and disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye. However, Luo Fan found that he had already arrived at the primordial world. However, in the blink of an eye, he had directly traversed thousands of miles of the 18 levels of hell and 90,000 miles of the ground. He had directly returned to the primordial world. Behind him, a stone door stood erect. Looking at its appearance, it was the stone door that he had built in the Blood Sea. As expected, after carefully examining it, Luo Fan knew that this was not an illusion, but the real primordial world. He was overjoyed. The previous changes seemed simple, but in fact, it contained all the insights that Luo Fan had gained in the boundless Blood Sea for more than 130 years. The complexity and profoundness of the changes contained within had already exhausted Luo Fan's mental strength. Just now, Luo Fan seemed to have constructed an ordinary stone door, but in fact he had constructed an illusory world, a world that relied on the primordial world to exist. The stone door behind Luo Fan was constructed by Luo Fan in the illusory world. It was a passage that led to the real world. He stepped into the illusory world when he stepped through the stone door. When he stepped out of the stone door, he once again stepped into the real world. As a result, the transformation between real and fake produced an extremely mysterious effect. With the illusory world as a medium, he directly connected two places in the real world. With a thought, he turned around, and the stone door behind him closed out of thin air. He took a step forward, pushed the stone door open, and stepped into it. The stone door closed and disappeared without a trace. And Luo Fan's figure, in a breath's time, arrived at the top of Buzhou Mountain, which was billions of miles away from where he was. He arrived at the door of the cave abode. Stepping out of the door, he felt the extremely familiar aura, primordial chi, and pressure. Luo Fan could not help but feel that it was a lifetime ago. It was billions of miles away. Even with Luo Fan's speed in the Wuji Palace, he would probably need to fly for several days to cross the distance. But at this time, he actually spent less than a breath's time to cross this distance. This feeling really made people feel that it was an illusion. When the real is false, the false is true. When the false is true, the true is false. Nothing more, nothing more. Luo Fan let out a long sigh. It's a pity that it consumes too much power. In just a short time, it consumes nearly 10% of my power. It's really too extravagant. After sighing for a long time, Luo Fan frowned slightly. It was fine to use the illusory world as a medium to move the void for a short distance. But to reach the distance of billions of miles, the power consumed was simply so much that it made people feel cold. Roughly estimating, with Luo Fan's current cultivation, it would probably consume nearly 60% of his power to go from Buzhou Mountain to where Hongjun was. Chapter 221. Heaven Watcher overseeing the wilderness during this trip to the Yellow Springs. Luo Fan's harvest was quite considerable. It had far exceeded his own expectations. Not only did he have a rough idea of what the Great Demon Lord's goal was, but he also learned from the Great Demon Lord's words how the Great Calamity would break out in 30,000 years. At this time, Luo Fan already had an idea in his mind to increase his chances of surviving the Great Calamity. Therefore, he did not continue to feel sentimental. He turned around and took a step forward. In the blink of an eye, he had arrived at the top of Buzhou Mountain, above the liquid chaotic Yuan-Chi Sea. He lifted a finger, and the infinite void palace rushed out of his sea of consciousness. It pressed down and sank into the depths of the liquid chaotic Yuan-Chi Sea. It began to violently swallow the endless chaotic Yuan-Chi, tempering itself and stabilizing the dimensional space inside. Luo Fan did not pay attention to the infinite void palace. He immediately sat down cross-legged. The earthly immortal's Tao fruit in his dantian vibrated slightly, constantly swallowing the chaotic Yuan-Chi around him to replenish the 10% of energy that was lost due to teleportation. After a while, he covered his left hand. From his sleeve, a strange material with a diameter of 100 feet rushed out and fell in front of him. This material had the appearance of a grayish crystal. It didn't appear to be very clear, but rather a little murky, as if there were many impurities within it. There were also traces of spatial fluctuations coming from it, as if there was some sort of extremely large space within it. This material was obtained by Luo Fan in the underground magma layer. It was a void crystal that could not be affected by the magma and could resist the corrosion of the magma. This crystal was a chaotic golden crystal. After endless tempering, it was compressed by an incomparably great power. In the end, it was compressed from its original diameter of hundreds of thousands of feet to its current diameter of 100 feet. Its internal characteristics had also changed in a strange way. It could even withstand the material of a dimensional space. He raised his hand and beckoned over the void crystal that was 100 feet in size. Lifting his hand, he felt that the weight of hundreds of thousands of kilograms was quite comfortable. Gently holding the crystal, Luo Fan quietly sorted out the thoughts in his mind. In the blink of an eye, countless complicated and abstruse words and patterns continuously collapsed and recombined in his mind. Gradually, they formed a profound and complicated formation. After the formation was formed, he raised his hand and pointed. The void crystal floated up from his hand as if it was weightless. It slowly rotated in front of him, and the ripples of space became more obvious. After the crystal spun for a while, a Tao flame rushed out from Luo Fan's hand and wrapped around the void crystal. The Tao fire was a mysterious flame that was born from the Tao fruit. It used chaotic vital energy as its fuel, and it contained boundless mysteries. Moreover, it had countless benefits for refining artifacts. This was the top of Buzhou Mountain. The chaotic vital energy was so dense that it had already turned into a liquid. The fuel for the Tao fire was so abundant that it was naturally extremely beneficial to the Tao fire. After this fire appeared, it instantly grew 10 times larger. In the blink of an eye, it had already enveloped the entire void crystal and was burning fiercely. It was as if a gray sun had appeared above the liquid, chaotic, primordial chi sea. The void crystal was a material that could remain intact even in the lava layer of the earth fire. One could imagine how tough it was. However, under the burning of the Tao fire, it could not even hold on for a single breath. When the Tao fire soared to the size of the sun, the surface of the void crystal showed signs of melting. After a few breaths, the void crystal that weighed hundreds of thousands of kilograms had completely melted into a liquid ball that was 100 feet in diameter. It kept twisting as it was wrapped in the Tao fire. At the same time, the superpower of the Tao fire in refining materials was unleashed to its limit. Wisps of smoke were emitted from the liquid ball at all times. When they were burned by the Tao fire, they disappeared without a trace. Following this change, the impurities in the liquid ball continued to decrease, and the volume of the material also rapidly shrank. After 3 days and 3 nights, the liquid ball had already shrunk to the size of a head. Its volume had shrunk by more than 100 times, and its nature had become extremely condensed and pure. It was almost impossible to remove any trace of impurities. Furthermore, the spatial ripples it emitted were extremely intense. It made people feel like it was not a mass of matter, but a space. Seeing that the material had been refined to such a degree, Luo Fan no longer hesitated. He raised his hand and patted it gently. Countless three-dimensional talisman shadows suddenly rushed out of his hand and instantly rushed into the Tao fire. They directly entered the small ball of gray liquid the size of a head. After these three-dimensional talismans rushed into the liquid, the gray liquid suddenly underwent a drastic change. Its volume expanded rapidly and twisted rapidly. In the blink of an eye, it had already turned into a 3-foot-wide disc. On the entire surface of the disc, there were countless three-dimensional talismans rotating and recombining crazily, gradually forming an extremely mysterious large formation. The moment the large array was formed, the Tao fire that was like a gray sun that wrapped the material suddenly condensed. Then, it converged and entered the disc. As the Tao fire entered the disc, the mysterious large array seemed to be stimulated by something. The lines that were formed by countless three-dimensional talismans suddenly erupted with endless mysterious light. There seemed to be countless light shadows flashing in the mysterious light. These light shadows were extremely similar to the boundless sea of blood. The endless light shadows that came from the blood seemed to contain all the scenes in the world, whether it was the mountains and rivers, the boundless earth, the ferocious beasts pouncing on their prey, the long grass, and the birds flying. Luo Fan's mind and intent guarded the large array that he had just sent out. He raised his hand and gently waved it. As he waved it, the image of the disc kept changing and changing. Gradually, it changed from its original appearance of being condensed from liquid to an extremely simple, yet all-encompassing copper mirror. The extremely strong spatial fluctuations that the material emitted also disappeared in an instant. When the bronze mirror was formed, Luo Fan covered it with his left hand, and a thumb-sized crystal appeared in his hand. It was emitting a mysterious fluctuation, and there were wisps of mist that were constantly changing its shape. This crystal was one of the 18 mysterious items that could upgrade a Dharma artifact to a Dharma treasure that he had obtained on Buzhou Mountain. After the crystal appeared, Luo Fan waved his right hand and drew mysterious and unpredictable trajectories. As the trajectories were created, the crystal was affected by a mysterious and invisible force. In the blink of an eye, it collapsed with a loud bang and turned into extremely fine stone powder. It suddenly pounced forward and instantly pounced into the copper mirror. As the stone powder pounced into the copper mirror, it was as if a kind of magical power had suddenly acted on it. A strange fluctuation gradually spread from the copper mirror, as if it was omniscient and omnipresent. The aura emitted by the copper mirror rapidly increased with the generation of this fluctuation. The formation on the copper mirror continuously flashed with all kinds of unpredictable lights. These lights were extremely mysterious. They seemed to have endless power, and they also seemed to be evolving some kind of unspeakable mystery. The entire process lasted for a total of 9 days and 9 nights. At a certain moment after 9 days and 9 nights, the copper mirror suddenly turned into a child with a hazy appearance, as if it was covered by a thick layer of fog. It was impossible to see his appearance at all, but it seemed that anyone who saw him would think that they were looking at their own child. After the child appeared, he bowed towards Luo Fan and said, "Greetings, Master." Luo Fan smiled faintly and said, "From now on, you will monitor the primordial world. If there is a space door that leads to the outer realm, inform me." "Yes, Master." The child bowed again. With a turn of his body, he had already transformed into a simple and unadorned copper mirror with a gray flame pattern on its back. The front of the copper mirror was like an extremely deep whirlpool. There seemed to be nothing in it, but it also seemed to contain a complete world. Then, the copper mirror swayed slightly and silently merged into the void, disappearing in front of Luo Fan. At the same time, Luo Fan felt that there was an extremely strange feeling in his mind. It seemed that as long as he was willing, he could communicate with the child at any time and control him at any time. Sensing this change, Luo Fan was very satisfied. The copper mirror was a Dharma treasure that he had refined. It was called the Heaven Observation Mirror. Its power was extremely powerful, and it could monitor the spatial changes of the entire primordial world. This seemed unbelievable, but in fact, it did not contain much mystery. It was just that he had used the mystery of the illusion Tao that he had comprehended from the boundless sea of blood to create the world creation illusion formation. After fusing the void crystal essence into the formation, with the help of the formation and the profoundness of the materials, the bronze mirror became a Dharma artifact with an extremely incomplete illusory world inside. This illusory world relied on the primordial world to exist, and it had all kinds of unimaginable magical powers. Just like how the transformation between illusion and reality could allow Luo Fan to easily cross a distance of billions of kilometers, the copper mirror could also reflect the spatial changes of the primordial world to a certain extent. Because of Luo Fan's control, the illusory world was extremely incomplete, and it had already strengthened its power to the limit. After Luo Fan upgraded it to a Dharma treasure, the range expanded to the almost infinite extent of the entire primordial world. As a result, it had the incredible power to monitor the spatial changes of the entire primordial world. With the Heaven Observation Child, when the great freedom heavenly devil lord builds a door that leads to his freedom heaven in the future, I will be able to detect it immediately and deal with it, Luo Fan thought to himself. Chapter 222. The god of Buzhou Mountain, Fun Tian, and Yu Su with the sky, gazing boy, monitoring the primordial world, Luo Fan no longer had to pay attention to the changes in the primordial world at all times. He could already wholeheartedly prepare various methods to deal with the Great Tribulation. If the Great Tribulation were to develop normally, he would face the attacks of billions of Great Freedom Heavenly Demons who were weaker than a Great Freedom Heavenly Demon Lord. If he failed, the entire primordial world would be occupied by the billions of heavenly demons. His living space would be extremely compressed, and he might even have to withstand the attacks of billions of heavenly demons. In the end, he would die. If he relied on his own strength, he would be too weak. If he did not pull in more people to deal with it, what awaited him would only be the destruction of his soul. Anyway, this matter was related to all the living beings in the primordial world. Luo Fan did not feel guilty about dragging them into the water. The god of Buzhou Mountain, Fun Tian, and Yu Su are the strongest, but they have to be contacted. Even the couple Yuan Tong and Yuan Qi should be dragged into the water. Hong Jun and Guang Pu's cultivation level is barely enough, so they can participate. Fu and Chunyang's cultivation level is too low, so I can't let them know. I have to put them in a safe place to protect them. Luo Fan thought to himself. After making up his mind will flow through the mysterious deduction technique recorded in the deduction scroll of the Tao Fruit Tao scripture. His right hand opened and closed, creating countless hand shadows. He began to quickly form hand seals. As his right hand moved, the location of the god of Buzhou Mountain, Yu Su, Infant Tian, as well as what they were doing, flowed through his mind. Of the three of them, one was at the foot of Buzhou Mountain, one had transformed into a flaming mountain, and one was in the Yu River. Each of them used their own methods to improve their cultivation. He carefully calculated the cultivation level of the three of them. It was extremely easy, as if he was reading the lines on his palm. In the blink of an eye, he had already understood the cultivation level of the three of them. With the help of Pan Gu's spine from time to time, the divine god of Buzhou Mountain had been improving incredibly fast. During these years, he was only one step away from the level of divine god. That was equivalent to attaining the earthly, immortal Tao fruit. At this moment, the true body of the god of Buzhou Mountain was still at the foot of Buzhou Mountain. The large rock that his body was on was emitting a misty, dark light. As it breathed in and out, boundless chaotic essence was being rapidly absorbed by it. His second body, which had yet to be fully formed, had already arrived in the sky and was using various techniques to frantically gather the gale, lightning, and fire. It seemed like he wanted to absorb the gale, lightning, and fire into his body to make up for the completeness of his second body. Although using the astral wind, thunder, and fire to supplement the second body would be faster and more powerful, it was still an external object after all. The potential of the second body formed by using this method would be far less than the second body formed by using the chaos yuan qi. In the future, the progress of cultivation would be extremely slow, and there might even be no progress at all. If not for the fact that he had to deal with the great calamity 30,000 years later, the god of Buzhou Mountain would definitely not make such a choice. Looking at the actions of the god of Buzhou Mountain, Luo Fan had already analyzed the mentality of the god of Buzhou Mountain in the blink of an eye. He knew that there was no need for him to say anything else. He shifted his attention to where Fan Tian was. Fan Tian had cultivated the mysterious primordial spirit way. Moreover, after Luo Fan had modified the primordial spirit way, it had become more complete. It had even allowed him to create a real innate Taoist body. In the future, his progress could be said to be smooth sailing, and his future was limitless. At this moment, Fan Tian's primordial spirit had transformed into a flaming mountain. It was devouring the true sun fire and the essence of the sun that were sprinkling down from the nine heavens, continuously purifying the nature of his energy. The flaming mountain that was formed by the primordial spirit had already shrunk by a size compared to the one that Luo Fan had seen previously. However, the temperature of the flames on was unknown how many times higher it was compared to the last time. In fact, the purity of the primordial spirit was also much stronger than before. With a thought, Luo Fan raised his hand and pointed. A speck of spiritual light rushed out from his hand and flashed. With the help of the void teleportation ability, he quickly teleported towards Fan Tian. Teleporting this speck of spiritual light was very different from teleporting his body. The amount of energy consumed was much less. It was only a distance of a few 100 million kilometers. To Luo Fan, the consumption of energy was almost negligible. In the blink of an eye, the speck of spiritual light had already traversed a distance of a few 100 million kilometers and arrived at the flaming mountain that was more than 70,000 kilometers away. Suddenly, it turned and shot out billions of rays of light. It was as if there was another sun in the sky. Just as the billions of specks of light appeared, a figure whose entire body was wrapped in flames rushed out from the highest peak of the flaming mountain. In the blink of an eye, he arrived at the envelopment of the billions of specks of light. With a turn of his body, he had already entered it and directly gathered the speck of spiritual light. As the spiritual light was gathered, the billions of specks of light disappeared in an instant. The figure that rushed out from the flaming mountain was Fan Tian, who had already created the innate Tao body. Fan Tian gathered the speck of spiritual light and raised his hand to point. The speck of spiritual light rushed and exploded, transforming into countless words and information. With a rush, it rushed to the peak of the flaming mountain that was more than 70,000 kilometers below. In the blink of an eye, it fused with his primordial spirit and turned into a huge amount of memories. The great calamity is upon us. Billions of heavenly demons have entered the primordial world. How could this be? Fan Tian took a quick look at the memories and could not help but be shocked. An incomparably shocked expression appeared on his face. The memories contained within the speck of spiritual light were Luo Fan's understanding of the vast freedom demon lord, as well as his various guesses about the great calamity that would occur more than 30,000 years later, as well as his various deductions about the scale of the great calamity. Fan Tian was extremely familiar with Luo Fan's aura. When a speck of spiritual light appeared above his primordial spirit, he had already understood that it was the spiritual light emitted by Luo Fan. Naturally, he had absolute faith in Luo Fan, and he completely believed in the memories contained within the speck of spiritual light. Since Luo Fan said that such a great calamity would occur more than 30,000 years later, such a great calamity would naturally occur. At this moment, what appeared in his mind was the scene of the billions of heavenly demons that were weaker than him, covering the sky and covering the earth. Thinking about it, he could not help but shiver. Even though his entire body was enveloped by the scorching flames, he could not help but feel a chill run down his spine. If I were to endure such an attack, I would not be able to hold on for more than a day before I die. This won't do. I need to seek advice from fellow Taoist, Fantion muttered. As he thought about it, he raised his hand and waved. The flaming mountain that was more than 70,000 kilometers below him shook violently, causing the ground to rumble and shake forcefully. Following the sound, the flaming mountain gradually left the ground. In the process, it continued to condense and twist, gradually transforming into the appearance of a 30,000 feet long nine-headed lion. After the nine-headed lion was formed, it pounced towards Fan Tian's innate Taoist physique. In the process, it shrank rapidly, and in the blink of an eye, it was absorbed into the mud pellet between Fan Tian's innate Taoist physique. As the nine-headed lion entered, the flames on the surface of Fan Tian's body suddenly exploded, and the temperature increased by more than 10 times. The color of the flames changed rapidly, and in the blink of an eye, it turned into a blazing white. Following that, the blazing white flames wrapped around his body and turned into a blazing white rainbow, charging straight in the direction of Buzhou Mountain, leaving behind an afterimage that was hundreds of feet long in midair. Although his speed was not as fast as Luo Fan's, it was not that far off. Luo Fan was able to see this clearly with the help of his power of deduction, and he sighed in his heart. At the same time, he shifted his attention to Yu Su. In his deduction, Yu Su's cultivation state was extremely clear to him, as if he was looking at the lines on his palm. That was because Yu Su's cultivation state was still far from his performance. In the depths of Yu water, in the cave abode, where time flowed 6 times faster than the outside world, Yu Su sat cross-legged with his completed innate Taoist physique. The talisman divinity within his body was constantly vibrating, and in the process it was constantly swallowing and spitting out an endless amount of innate water essence, continuously tempering his innate Taoist physique and the power within his body. During this process, the Long Yu water became more and more integrated with his body, and the magic item that the Yu water transformed into became more and more mysterious. Luo Fan raised his hand and pointed. Another spiritual light dashed out from his hand, and with the void teleportation technique, it dashed straight towards Yu Su. After a short while, it had traveled hundreds of millions of miles and arrived above Yu water. After arriving above Yu water, the spiritual light did not stop. With a twist, it dashed into Yu water, and with another dash, it entered the cave abode below Yu water. It floated above Yu Su's head, and slowly emitted rays of mysterious light. Yu Su was stimulated by the mysterious light, and he opened his eyes. With one look, he knew the source of the mysterious light, and he was shocked. He knew that Luo Fan would not contact him easily if there was nothing important. Now that Luo Fan had sent a spiritual light, it proved that the situation had become extremely bad. Thinking of this, Yu Su's face showed an anxious expression. He raised his hand and pointed at the spiritual light. The spiritual light suddenly trembled, and he absorbed it into his talisman divinity. With a burst, it turned into a huge amount of memories. This memory was naturally the same as what Fantion had received. It was also about the vast heavenly demon lord, and about the great calamity that would happen 30,000 years later. Oh no, how can I survive this great calamity without the Lord? Yu Su was even more straightforward and exclaimed. As soon as he finished speaking, he did not stop. With a turn of his body, he left the cave abode, and with another dash, he was already out of Yu water. Next, he raised his hand and waved. A wheel of time rushed out of the cave abode, and with a sudden turn, it sucked crazily, as if the Milky Way was hanging upside down. Below him, the Yu water suddenly protruded upwards, as if it was being sucked by an extremely strong force. It kept rushing upwards, and in the blink of an eye, It was connected to the wheel of time above his head. The sound of water splashing could be heard continuously. The wheel of time continued to spin and quickly absorbed the water below. The speed of absorption became faster and faster, and the amount of water it absorbed increased. After half a day, the entire water was completely absorbed. It transformed into a tiny, sparkling, and translucent crystal flood dragon, which rotated continuously within the wheel of time. Holding the wheel of time, Yusu felt as if he was carrying a heavy mountain. Chapter 223. Funtian, Yusu, roaming the primordial wasteland. Following that, Yusu's body trembled. As the energy in his body surged, 1,296 runes suddenly appeared around his body, forming a stream of air that suddenly wrapped around his body. After the rune wrapped around his body, it immediately turned into a ray of profound light and charged straight in the direction of Buzhou Mountain. The flying speed of the profound light was even faster than Funtian's speed by a notch. It was not the slightest bit inferior to Luo Fan's escape light. It left behind a long afterimage in mid-air, drawing a mysterious trajectory. To Funtian and Yusu, who were moving at an extremely fast speed, the distance of hundreds of millions of kilometers was just a distance that was neither too long nor too short. When Yusu set off, it had already been half a day since he left Funtian. At this moment, he had already traversed hundreds of millions of kilometers and arrived at the foot of Buzhou Mountain. As expected of Brother Luo Fan's dojo, it is indeed extremely high and mysterious, containing endless mysteries. The blazing white rainbow suddenly descended, and in the blink of an eye, it transformed into a middle-aged, brawny man dressed in a fiery red robe at the foot of Buzhou Mountain. This middle-aged, brawny man was the nine-headed lion, Funtian, who had transformed into the innate Dao body. Funtian's ability to control flames was unimaginably powerful. Even Luo Fan was able to comprehend many mysteries from the process of him controlling the flames. Standing there, he raised his head and looked at the unseeable Buzhou Mountain. He lifted his feet and shook them, causing a fiery cloud to condense beneath his feet. It was as if it was a real object, carrying his body straight towards the top of Buzhou Mountain. When Luo Fan parted ways with Funtian the last time, he had left a bit of spiritual light that recorded the location of the Seeker Cave at Funtian's place. At this moment, Funtian naturally knew the location of the Seeker Cave based on the spiritual light. Although the speed at which he floated upwards was not as fast as the blazing white rainbow, it was not considered slow either. After a while, he arrived at the top of Buzhou Mountain under the support of the fire cloud and landed in front of the Seeker Cave. This place was not the true peak of Buzhou Mountain. Although there was a huge pressure from the heavens and earth, it was only the aftermath. However, it was nothing to him. On the contrary, it gave him a sense of stability because of the appropriate amount of pressure. Standing in front of Grotto, he took a deep breath. It was as if a small black hole had been created. Endless chaotic primordial energy surged over and squeezed into his mouth. It surged straight into his body, and in an instant, it was twisted into the purest energy and completely filled his nascent soul, which was shaped like a nine-headed flame lion. The chaotic chi at the top of Buzhou Mountain was so dense that it was the best in the primordial world. When had Funtian ever enjoyed such rich primal chaos elemental energy? At the instant the boundless chaotic essence energy charged into his soul core, he felt as if he was floating in the air, and he even felt that cultivating here was simply the most wonderful place in the primordial world. Awesome! After letting out a long breath, Funtian could not help but cry out, "Fellow Taoist, you came from afar. Forgive me for not welcoming you earlier." Right at this moment, Luo Fan's voice came from above Funtian's head. Funtian raised his head and saw Luo Fan walking down from the sky towards where he was. The moment I received your message, I immediately rushed over. I've been late for a long time. Please forgive me. Funtian bowed and said. While speaking, Luo Fan had already arrived in front of Funtian and chuckled. The cave is simple and crude, but it can be considered a place to stay. Fellow Taoist, please enter. As he spoke, he had already pulled Fentian into the cave. Fentian did not resist. He smiled and followed the direction of Luo Fan's force and walked into the cave. The moment they entered the cave, a few yellow scar strong men came forward to serve them. They set up tables and chairs for guests and even served tea that emitted a faint fragrance. This item is actually so mysterious. It actually has a rather complete spiritual consciousness. Fellow Taoist, Fentian is extremely impressed. Fentian was extremely knowledgeable. He naturally recognized that these yellow scar strong men were refined magic tools and could not help but exclaim in admiration. It's just a small trick. If fellow Taoist likes it, I can pass on the refining method to fellow Taoist. Luo Fan laughed. Haha, I couldn't ask for more. Fentian was overjoyed. Haha, I couldn't ask for more. Fentian was overjoyed. Both of them were people who had already proven their Tao. Regardless of whether it was their cultivation or patience, they were extremely astonishing. After meeting each other, they did not talk about the great calamity, but instead started to chat about the Tao. During this process, Luo Fan even fulfilled his promise and passed down the Hercules summoning technique to Fentian, which made Fentian extremely happy. Just like that, another half a day passed. A wave of rune aura came straight to the front of the cave and landed with a loud bang. UG seeks an audience with the Supreme Being. I hope that the Supreme Being will grant me an audience. A respectful and aged voice came from the entrance of the cave. Luo Fan smiled and said, "Another guest has arrived. Please forgive me for not welcoming you earlier." With that, he made an inviting gesture and left the cave together with Fentian. Just as they stepped out of the cave, they saw a short and capable middle-aged man standing there with his body bowed. That was Yusu. When Yusu saw Luo Fan, his eyes were filled with gratitude and respect, and he bowed once again. Luo Fan hurriedly helped him up and introduced Fentian to him, and also introduced him to Fentian. Yusu and Fentian were both innate gods with great divine abilities, so it was extremely easy for them to analyze other people's personalities from their words. Therefore, after just a few words, the two of them were already completely familiar with each other's personalities. Perhaps it was because the other party was the second person they had met in their lives, but they felt a sense of regret for not having met each other earlier. The way they looked at each other became incomparably intimate. Luo Fan saw the change in their attitudes, but he was rather satisfied in his heart. Originally, there were very few innate gods that could be on the same level as them in the great wasteland world, and the ones he had met were even rarer. Yusu and Fentian were two of the few innate gods. It would be a pity if the two of them did not see eye to eye with each other. On the contrary, if the two of them saw eye to eye with each other, their thoughts would collide, and they would be able to evolve even more mysteries of the great Tao, allowing everyone to improve much faster than before. After the three of them entered the cave and sat down, Luo Fan told them about the great demon lord. Although Yusu and Fentian already knew about the existence of the vast freedom demon lord from the spiritual light that Luo Fan had transmitted to them previously, they also roughly knew what the vast freedom demon lord was going to do 30,000 years later. However, Yusu and Fentian were still rather shocked when they heard Luo Fan's introduction. "I wonder what brother knows about the great demon lord. Can you explain to us?" After all, Fentian had been calm for half a day. He regained his senses and asked, "The great demon lord is one of the boundless outer realms outside the great wasteland world. It was a world that was created by the aftermath of Pangu's power when he created the world. The level of the world was much lower than the great wasteland world, but the speed at which time flowed was at least 10 million times faster than the great wasteland world. Counting it, this Vaishnava transformation has existed for an unknown number of trillions of years." Luo Fan sighed and said, "In 1,000,000,000,000 years, wouldn't it be possible to give birth to living beings that are far stronger than you? How can we resist it?" Yusu exclaimed, "You can't calculate like that." Luo Fan shook his head and said, "The level of the world represents the stability of the space. Naturally, It represented the strength of the living beings that the world could withstand. Although the great demon lord had developed for trillions of years, due to the restrictions of the world, he could only withstand cultivators as strong as the great demon lord at most. If an even stronger expert were to break through, they would either be sucked dry by the world, or they would shatter the void and enter a new world that could withstand their cultivation. Hearing Luo Fan's explanation, Yusu and Fun Tian both heaved a sigh of relief. When the two of them first met Luo Fan, they had already felt how powerful Luo Fan was, so they naturally believed in Luo Fan's judgment. Of course, they would not doubt that Luo Fan would speak carelessly. Although there are no more powerful living beings, the great demon lord has experienced too much time, and there are countless living beings that are slightly weaker than us. It can be said that the next 30,000 years will be the last period of peace in the Great Wasteland. Luo Fan saw that the two of them had already understood what he was saying, and sighed and said, "Fellow Taoist, your cultivation is 100 times stronger than ours. You should know how to deal with the Great Tribulation this time. Feel free to instruct us." Fun Tian said solemnly, "If you have any ideas, please give us your orders." Yusu also helped. Luo Fan was not modest, and said, "If that's the case, I will overstep my boundaries. In order to survive the great tribulation of the primordial world, there is indeed one thing that needs the two of you to do." Fun Tian and Yusu were not moved at all. They bowed, and their intention to let Luo Fan instruct them was vividly expressed. Luo Fan raised his hand, and a huge amount of chaotic qi gathered, condensing into 2 pieces of silk in front of the two of them that were full of pictures. The silk roughly outlined the structure of the Great Wasteland. Of course, it was just the rough shape that he saw from the ends of the earth. The specific terrain of the Great Wasteland was not something that he could understand at the moment. There are countless experts in the Great Wasteland. Although you and I have already achieved the Tao, we are probably only at the bottom of the list. Today, we are about to face the Great Tribulation that will affect the entire Great Wasteland. With just our strength, it will be difficult for us to win. Therefore, I would like to invite the two of you to go to various places in the Great Wasteland to look for experts and gather all the strength that can be gathered to deal with the Great Tribulation." Luo Fan said. Fun Tian and Yusu looked at the silk that had condensed in front of them, and their faces were filled with shock. The two of them had long known that Luo Fan was many times stronger than them, but they had never thought that Luo Fan would be so much stronger than them. Although they had already achieved the Tao, their knowledge had at most expanded to the world within a radius of 100 million miles from where they lived. At this moment, what was placed in front of them was the structure of the entire Great Wasteland. Compared to their knowledge, this was more than 1 trillion times greater. How could the two of them not be shocked? After a long time, the two of them kept the silk, stood up, and said, "We will not disappoint you." Chapter 224. Tai Chaotic Water Essence. When Yusu and Fun Tian heard what Luo Fan said, they were overjoyed and said in unison, "We were about to ask for this item from the Supreme Elder, fellow Taoist." Luo Fan slightly smiled. He raised his left hand and covered it in front of him. Then 2 skull-sized objects rushed out from his sleeve universe, lightly floating. They were floating in front of Yusu and Fun Tian, as if they were not affected by any force. These 2 objects were quite mysterious. They were 2 spiritual stones that could turn memories into images. With a thought from Luo Fan, countless rays of light flashed through his mind and suddenly rushed out from his fingers. In the blink of an eye, they all rushed into the 2 spirit stones. As the countless spiritual lights rushed into the 2 spiritual stones, countless lights and shadows suddenly flashed inside the 2 spiritual stones. These lights and shadows were Luo Fan's image of the great freedom heavenly demon lord, his abilities, and the scene where he came into contact with the great freedom heavenly demon lord when he was going through the heavenly tribulation, as well as the scene where the great freedom heavenly demon lord swarmed over when Guangpu was going through the heavenly tribulation, as well as the scene of the door that Mo Luo built in the Yellow Spring, were all injected into the 2 spiritual stones, and turned them into light and shadows. Yusu and Fantion trusted Luo Fan very much. Therefore, they could believe what Luo Fan said and did not need any proof from him. However, the other innate gods would not believe what Fantion and Yusu said if they did not produce any real evidence. How could the other innate gods believe that the entire primitive world will be facing a great calamity 30,000 years later? Although these spiritual stones could only turn memories into images, these memories were definitely worth pondering. As long as a living being was at a high enough cultivation level, they would definitely be able to tell how real the images on the spiritual stones were. Naturally, it would increase the credibility of Yusu and Fantion's narration. When Yusu and Fantion saw the two pieces of spirit stones, they immediately knew what Luo Fan was thinking. They secretly sighed at Luo Fan's thoughtfulness. After that, they each kept a piece of spirit stone, bowed to Luo Fan, and were about to leave. When Luo Fan saw this, he hurriedly raised his hand to stop them and said, "We've wasted a lot of time searching for the expert this time. Although you two fellow Taoists have lost your cultivation, it's not good to just let it go. I have two great formations that can condense Xiantian vital qi into chaotic vital qi and accelerate the flow of time by 10 times. They might be able to help the two of you." Nothing could be better. Yusu and Fantion were already prepared to waste over 30,000 years. Now that they heard Luo Fan saying that there was a way to make up for it, they could not help but be overjoyed. Luo Fan smiled faintly. He waved his left hand, and more than 10 kinds of strange materials rushed out from his sleeve. These materials were rather strange, as they existed in the form of gas. It looked like more than 10 balls of misty gas of various colors were condensed between the three of them, and were fluctuating slightly along with the surging of the vital qi. Luo Fan raised his hand and waved gently. Then, countless silhouettes of silk threads appeared out of thin air, flashing continuously in the void. After these silhouettes appeared, they suddenly condensed and charged forward. In the blink of an eye, they had already charged into one of the balls of misty gas of various colors. As the countless silhouettes of energy threads charged in, the ball of misty gas seemed to have suddenly turned into a gigantic beast. It expanded abruptly, collided with the surroundings, and began to swallow the dozens of balls of gas around it. At the same time, the silhouettes of the energy threads that were constantly intertwining within the ball of misty gas also condensed rapidly. By the time the dozens of balls of gas were all swallowed by the gray gas, the energy threads had already condensed to the point where even the gray gas itself was absorbed into it, causing the dozens of balls of gas in front of the three of them to turn into 2 silk cocoons that were the size of a fist, weaved by countless strange silk threads. Although the silk cocoons looked oval, they contained some kind of indescribable mystery. With one look, one could tell that the silk cocoons were not simple, but some kind of unimaginable creation. These two great formations are space-time chaos formations. They contain a space with a circumference of 1,000 feet. Under normal circumstances, they can automatically absorb innate vital qi and turn it into chaotic vital qi. They can also accelerate the flow of time by 10 times. Although the space within them is not very stable, it should be able to support the two of you in your cultivation. Although they're not very precious, they can be considered as a token of my appreciation. Luo Fan waved his hand, and the 2 silk cocoons floated forward, arriving in front of Yusu and Fantion as he spoke. Space-time chaos formation, speeding up the flow of time. There's actually such a mysterious technique in this world. It's truly an eye-opener. It was the first time Fantion had seen such a formation that could change the flow of time. He was greatly shocked and could not help but exclaim in admiration as he held onto the formation lovingly. Although Yusu had some understanding of the Tao of changing time, the Tao of talismans that he cultivated was quite different from the structure of formations. Moreover, it was quite troublesome for him to change the flow of time. At this moment, seeing that Luo Fan was able to easily create a formation that could accelerate the flow of time by 10 times, the admiration on his face could not be suppressed. With this formation that could accelerate the flow of time by 10 times, the two of them only needed to spend 4 hours a day to cultivate, and the effect would be equivalent to a day of cultivation. In this way, with this formation, they could travel all over the primordial world and work hard to find the path of innate gods. It would not be an obstacle to their cultivation. It was even possible that because they had traveled the world, their own knowledge had continuously increased and their cultivation realm had improved a lot faster. Before they obtained this formation, the two of them still had the thought of sacrificing their own interests for the safety of the primordial world in order to repay Luo Fan's kindness. However, at this moment, they had long thrown this thought to the back of their minds. Instead, they felt that this was clearly an extremely beautiful task, a trip at public expense. The two of them did not say anything else. They had already understood the reason why Luo Fan took out these two formations. They bowed together, turned around, and took a step out of the cave. Following that, the two of them exerted their strength and used their own methods to either turn into a blazing white rainbow or a mysterious light made of talismans, charging in two different directions. On the simple map given to them by Luo Fan, he roughly marked the direction and route of their advance. As a result, the two innate gods, who had little knowledge and experience, did not have the thought of not knowing where to go in the vast world. Ao Lai and Ao Een, this is an opportunity that I have planned for the two of you. I only hope that you can react quickly enough and seize this opportunity. Don't waste my plans. Luo Fan watched Yusu and Fentian leave and thought to himself. The route that he had planned for Yusu and Fentian was not chosen at random. Instead, it contained many of his own considerations. It could also be said to be a plan. Needless to say, Fentian was only pointing out the direction that was most likely to have innate gods. As for the route that Yusu took, he had done something to it. It was not much. However, if Yusu were to follow this route, there was a high chance that he would pass by where Ao Lai and Ao Een were. He did not tell Yusu that the two of them were his divine guardian beasts. However, Yusu was searching for innate gods and would naturally pay attention to all living beings with cultivation bases. As long as he passed by where Ao Lai and Ao Een were, there was a 90% chance that he would find the two of them. As for Ao Lai and Ao Een, after receiving help from Luo Fan previously, they had already changed their source of cultivation to the Tao of Talismans. Meeting the creator of the Tao of Talismans could be said to be a great opportunity. If they could grab hold of it, they might be able to break through their bottleneck and achieve the body of a magic treasure. If they could not grab hold of it, there was nothing much to say. Although the two of you are not my disciples, I still need to plan for the two of you. However, if the two of you don't work hard and react fast enough, don't blame me, Luo Fan thought to himself. After a while, he stopped thinking about Ao Lai and Ao Een. At this moment, Ao Lai and Ao Een were hiding at a position that was more than 800 million miles away from Buzhou Mountain. Around 10,000 feet in front of the two of them, there was a small mountain that was more than 1,000 feet away from them, and there was a massive lake. This lake had a radius of more than 60,000 kilometers, and it was clear that it contained a boundless amount of natural water essence. There was also an even rarer and more precious wisp of primordial chaos water essence that contained some kind of indescribable mystery in the depths of this lake. The two of them had taken a fancy to this wisp of primordial chaos water essence. Ao Lai and Ao Een cultivated the Tao of magic treasures, and the best way to improve their cultivation base was to constantly fuse all kinds of rare materials into their bodies, constantly strengthening their bodies. Finally, through the accumulation of these materials, their fleshly bodies would be forcibly pushed to the magic treasure realm. Since this primordial chaos water essence could be called primordial chaos water essence, it was naturally extraordinary. Not only did it possess the characteristics of chaotic vital energy, but it also contained countless amounts of water essence. If such a tiny wisp, which was the size of a finger, were to be transformed into clear water, it would most likely be enough to fill a river that was thousands of kilometers wide and hundreds of thousands of kilometers long. It also contained some kind of supreme water elemental secret. If they could completely comprehend it, they wouldn't dare to say that they would be able to reach the heavens in a single step, but at the very least, it would be able to raise their cultivation base by a few notches. One could imagine how precious it was. However, with their cultivation base, it wasn't that easy to obtain that wisp of primordial chaos water essence. This was because the existence of the primordial unity chaotic water essence in the lake had caused a huge amount of natural water essence to condense and form a water dragon. It coiled around the primordial unity chaotic water essence, absorbing the aura it emitted and absorbing the surrounding natural water essence to strengthen itself. This water dragon was 100,000 feet long, and it was incomparably huge. The natural water essence within it was both dense and pure. Its power was also unimaginably great. The combination of this energy and power had pushed it to the equivalent of a Tao Vindication cultivator. Compared to Ao Lai and Ao Een, it was only an imperceptible sliver. Although it was only a sliver, it was already a world of difference. Even after Ao Lai and Ao Een used all of their means, they still couldn't deal with it. They couldn't even lure it away so that they could steal the primordial chaos water essence. Ao Een whispered to Ao Lai, "Damned fellow, it's already been 120 years. Why don't we just give up?" In any case, this bit of primordial chaos water essence can only push us to the magic treasure realm. Chapter 225. Pattern Amplification. Luo Fan did not care about what Ao Lai and Ao Een were doing. After all, it was their luck to seize the opportunity, but it would be their regret if they could not. No matter what the result was, Luo Fan had done what he could. The development of things was already out of his control. In the previous calculation, Luo Fan also knew the location and what they were doing of Hong Jun, Guangpu, Luo Fu, Yuan Tong, and Yuan Ming. The reason why he did not summon them was that it was not the right time. At this time, Hong Jun was still in the Gangfeng, Thunderbolt, and Fire Layer, more than 40 billion kilometers away from Buzhou Mountain, preaching Taoism and refining treasures, constantly luring infinite Gangfeng, Thunderbolt, and fire life into his magic treasure. At first glance, apart from the growth of the magic treasure's quality, there was not much difference from what Luo Fan had seen last time. After carefully calculating this tower-shaped magic treasure, Luo Fan already knew that it would take a long time for this magic treasure to be truly perfect. However, this was not a good time to tell Hong Jun about the situation of the great calamity of the primordial world. And Guangpu was still in the center of the moon, operating the energy in her body that had already transformed into some signs of supernatural power, consolidating the realm of cultivation that had been improved after crossing the seventh heavenly tribulation. What she needed was to cultivate wholeheartedly, but it was not a good time to be told about the untainted land. And Luo Fu and Luo Chunyang, the father and son, had low cultivation. At this time, under the protection of Zhifeng Boy, they could walk on the untainted land to gain experience, not to mention more. As for Yuan Tong and Yuan Ming, at this time, they were in the courtyard more than 3 billion kilometers away from Buzhou Mountain, building a rather huge cave residence, using the infinite chaotic qi to purify Thunder Ape's body and help their son cultivate the pattern reversion technique. Although Luo Fan could tell them about the untainted land at any time, it would easily arouse their inner disgust, so it was better to let it go first and tell them when Thunder Ape's cultivation was on the right track. Therefore, at this moment, Luo Fan actually had nothing to do, but he had a rare moment of leisure. After careful consideration, Luo Fan had already made his decision. With a thought, the Tao Fire Talisman in the depths of the cave flashed, and his body once again appeared above the ocean of liquefied primal chaos chi at the top of Buzhou Mountain. He raised his hand and waved. Countless liquefied chaotic energies condensed into a 1-acre solid platform under him, supporting his body like a boulder. He sat cross-legged on the platform with a solemn expression on his face. It was rare for him to have free time at this moment, but it was the time to study how to reincarnate that drop of blood into the Tao fruit system. Possessing the ability to be reborn from a single drop of blood was equivalent to obtaining a near-immortal life. In fact, Luo Fan had already thought of how to use this immortal ability to the limit. He would first split up a part of his body and hide it in a place with sufficient primal chaos chi, then use a seal that was connected to his mind to seal it. As long as his body suffered an attack that he could not withstand, even his entire body and spirit were obliterated, this seal would lose its effect. That part of his flesh and blood would recover and grow, absorbing endless energy to regrow his physical body and spirit. If he could do this, it could be said that as long as he had a certain amount of caution, he could truly achieve immortality. With these various thoughts, Luo Fan naturally yearned for this ability to be reborn from a single drop of blood. The great Tao of patterns combines the spirit and the physical body, and then transforms all the cells of the body into profound and complex patterns. It transforms the source of all life, and only then can I possess the ability to be reborn from a single drop of blood. This method is quite different from the Tao fruit, but it is definitely not advisable. He pondered carefully. The great Tao of patterns had a ready-made method to be reborn from a single drop of blood, but it conflicted with the Tao fruit. Luo Fan naturally would not destroy his Tao fruit for this ability to be reborn from a single drop of blood. Luo Fan's mind revolved with the cultivation method of the great Tao of patterns, the various paths of energy flow, and the mysteries of the mantra. These mysteries were constantly collapsing and reforming according to his will. When Luo Fan had organized the great Tao of patterns, he had already left an empty space on the diagram questionnaire and had already formed a rough outline of the great Tao of patterns. However, he only truly gained a complete understanding of the great Tao of patterns after he met Yuan Tong and Yuan Shi and obtained the great Tao of patterns they had comprehended. After meeting Yuan Tong and his wife, he didn't find a chance to add the pattern Tao into the scripture of the way fruit of the way, because he had to chase after the great freedom demon lord. Although he had obtained this cultivation method, it was still relatively independent and didn't truly belong to him. Now that he was free, he naturally would not let this opportunity go. When he first organized the great Tao of patterns, Luo Fan had spent a full 10 yuan wei. Under such circumstances, even if he had endless divine abilities and techniques in his mind, it was sufficient for him to have a deep understanding of every single divine ability and technique recorded in the 12,960 volumes of the Tao Fruit's Grand Tao Scripture. At this moment, when he added the detailed Great Tao of Patterns into the diagram scroll, it was practically a matter of course. In less than a month, he had completely filled up the diagram scroll. He even added an extremely mysterious totem strongman summoning technique to the diagram scroll. With this technique, he could refine all kinds of materials into yellow turban strongman. Moreover, the yellow turban strongmen refined using this method were very similar to the yellow turban strongmen refined using this strongman summoning technique. They could also be divided into 36 restrictions. The only difference was that the yellow turban strongmen refined using this method had the power to be reborn from a single drop of blood. As long as there was a little bit of residue left, it could absorb the energy and regrow into a complete yellow turban strongman. Perhaps I can use this method to refine amplification magic tools. After organizing the totem strongman summoning technique, Luo Fan suddenly had a thought. With such an inspiration, he would not easily let it go. Countless specks of light suddenly flashed in his mind. Along with these ideas, countless scriptures of the great Tao of patterns flowed through. Countless patterns kept jumping out, collapsing, and reforming. After filling out the diagram scroll, Luo Fan's understanding of the great Tao of patterns had even surpassed that of Yuan Tong and Yuan Shi at this time. With that bit of inspiration as a guide, he was naturally successful in every endeavor. In the blink of an eye, he had already broken through one obstacle after another. In the end, the prototype of a magic tool took shape in his mind. This prototype was in the shape of a heart. It shone with a golden light, and there were countless lines flashing on it. A mysterious aura was emitted from it. Unfortunately, it's only useful for those who cultivate the great Tao of patterns. Also, because it's only a magic tool, It can at most raise the user's cultivation to near the undying body realm. Its effects are really quite limited. Luo Fan carefully pondered for a long time, and finally sighed helplessly. This magic tool's power was quite great, but there were also many limitations. After borrowing the power of the magic tool, the user's control over power was much less than that of those who had truly cultivated it. But that was only secondary. Most importantly, after this magic tool was refined, it was only useful for those who cultivated the great Tao of patterns. Moreover, it could only raise a cultivator to the undying body realm. In this way, the function of this magic tool could be said to be greatly weakened. At the very least, Luo Fan could only think of one living being that could use this magic tool, and that was Yuan Lei. Even Yuan Qi could not use this magic tool because his cultivation had reached the limit of what the magic tool could do, but it's fine. With this magic tool, Yuan Lei and Yuan Qi can presumably go everywhere to find experts without any worries. Luo Fan's thoughts turned, and he thought of the use of this magic tool. With this thought, he did not hesitate. He directly raised his hand and grabbed at the air. A large ball of liquid chaotic qi, with a diameter of thousands of meters, left the sea and arrived above his head. The essence of this magic tool was the combination of countless patterns, not the materials. Therefore, it was completely enough to refine it with pure chaotic qi, and it could even greatly enhance the power of this magic tool. With this thought in mind, countless patterns and images flashed in Luo Fan's eyes. Then, he raised his hand, and the ball of liquid chaotic qi, with a diameter of thousands of meters in front of him, quickly twisted, compressed, and condensed. During this process, countless patterns appeared out of thin air in the center of the liquid chaotic qi. After these countless patterns appeared, they did not scatter. Instead, they continued to gather, recombine, and connect with each other. Gradually, they formed an extremely profound organic body. Like a heart, it slowly expanded and contracted, constantly swallowing the rich liquid chaotic yuan qi around it. As the number of these patterns increased, so did the amount of liquid chaotic energy that the heart was absorbing. After half a day, when a number of patterns had increased to 129,600, the heart had become incomparably solid and complete. It was as if it was made of flesh and blood, and it was impossible to tell that it was made of patterns. Moreover, the amount of chaotic origin energy it breathed in and out surpassed the limit. With a single swallow, all of the liquid chaotic qi was swallowed into it. With a single spit, the ball of liquid chaotic qi, with a diameter of thousands of meters, gushed out. At this moment, the flickering patterns in Luo Fan's eyes gradually faded, and his eyes became extremely deep and pitch black again. After the ball of liquid chaotic qi was swallowed 81 times, it suddenly condensed and turned into a layer of golden light that wrapped around the heart. In an instant, the heart shone with golden light as if it was made of gold. There were also countless mysterious lines on it, causing it to constantly emit an extremely mysterious aura. Luo Fan raised his hand and beckoned, and the fist-sized heart floated into his hand. Chapter 226. The Tao of Tao of Tao of Tao heart, the golden heart throbbed, and the golden light on its surface flickered and flowed as it beat, giving off an indescribable sense of mystery. The artifact was refined based on the cultivation system of the Tao of Tao patterns, and there were no restrictions or anything like that to indicate its strength. It only constructed all the patterns into an organic whole. Through the structure of this organic whole, a huge amount of chaotic energy was absorbed into it, and then through all kinds of unimaginable changes, it achieved the effect of raising the cultivation of cultivators who cultivated the Tao of patterns. If I can raise it to the level of an artifact, I can raise the cultivator to the level of an immortal body, which will cause a fundamental change and give me the ability to be reborn from a single drop of blood. It's a pity that refining this artifact into an artifact is as difficult as cultivating an immortal body. Luo Fan thought carefully, already planning what to do next. With a thought, a bit of light rushed out of his mind, passed through the Niwen between his eyebrows and directly rushed into the magic tool in his hand. Then, he raised his hand and shook it. The artifact that looked like a heart suddenly turned, turning into a beam of golden light that cut through the sky, quickly shooting in the direction of Yuan Tong and Yuan Chi's family of three. When it was about 1,000 kilometers away from Buzhou Mountain, it suddenly flashed and disappeared from the primordial world. In another flash, it appeared in front of Yuan Tong and Yuan Chi's cave abode, in front of a mountain that was millions of meters tall. It was precisely the void-shifting technique that allowed it to cross a distance of more than 3 billion kilometers in the blink of an eye, sending an object to a certain place and personally reaching a certain place were two completely different actions, and the amount of energy consumed was tens of thousands of times different. To Luo Fan, sending the artifact more than 3 billion kilometers away only consumed a little energy, and it was a world of difference compared to traveling more than 3 billion kilometers on his own. The golden light circled around the mountain a few times, then rushed straight to the waist of the mountain, and in the blink of an eye, it had entered a cave with a diameter of 3,000 meters. After traveling for nearly 100 kilometers, he finally arrived at an underground space that was several 100,000 meters in radius. The gray, chaotic energy inside the space was visible to the naked eye. It was piled up at the bottom of the space, making the underground space look like a fairyland. Ape Tong, Ape Chi, and Ape Thunder were in the center of the space. Among them, Yuan Tong and his wife had shrunk to the size of 1,000 feet. Although they still looked very shocking, they were 100 times smaller than before. They were roughly the same size as Yuan Lei. This was the method of changing the size of their bodies that they had comprehended from the pattern regression technique. When the golden light entered, Ape Chi was in the middle of gathering the chaotic vital energy below. Ape Tong compressed the gathered chaotic vital energy into a small stream and sent it into Ape Lei's body through the top of his head to help him cultivate the diagram ancestral art. This golden light was specially sent by Luo Fan, so it naturally did not conceal its aura. When it entered the cave, its aura surged, causing the countless patterns engraved on the walls of the space to flicker. Countless mysterious lights flowed on the walls, creating a huge pressure that directly acted on the golden light. This power caused the golden light to stagnate, then condense into a shining golden heart. It stretched and shrank, trembled and jumped. It seemed to be communicating with the countless patterns around it, but it also seemed to be swallowing some mysterious existence that was hard to fathom. Such a huge and obvious change naturally attracted the attention of Ape Tong and Ape Chi. Their eyes flashed, and they saw the golden heart. Yuan Tong's cultivation was higher, but he had more time to spare, so he was naturally the one to deal with this. He was shocked at first, but then he was overjoyed. He had already cultivated to the immortal body realm, and his observation and perception abilities were even more astonishing. At this moment, at a glance, he could see the essence of this golden heart as a ritual implement, and he could even guess where this golden heart came from. He continued to pour chaotic energy into Yuan Tong's body with his right hand, and he raised his left hand. The golden heart obediently flew into his hand. The heart was only the size of Luo Fan's fist. Compared to Yuan Tong's body, which was hundreds of meters wide, it was like the tip of a needle. The disparity was extremely great. As the needle-like heart entered his hand, a bit of spirit light appeared and slowly flowed into Yuan Tong's body through the point of contact between him and the golden heart. Yuan Tong's control over his body had already reached the level of being reborn from a single drop of blood. Coupled with the fact that this bit of spirit light was not concealed at all, he was extremely clear about how it entered his body, and he could grasp every single detail. He felt that this bit of spirit light was extremely weak, and he could even extinguish it at any time. Moreover, this spirit light was also very familiar to him. It contained Luo Fan's aura. With these two conditions, Yuan Tong did not hesitate. He directly absorbed this bit of spirit light into his mind. After the bit of spirit light entered Yuan Tong's mind, it suddenly exploded and turned into countless memories. Yuan Tong could no longer maintain his calm after sweeping through these memories and suddenly cried out. Due to the agitation in his mind, he could not even maintain the motion of pouring chaotic energy into Yuan Tong's body. His hand suddenly trembled, and the thin stream of chaotic energy dissipated. In the blink of an eye, countless specks of gray light scattered in all directions, and the long stream became irregular. The chaotic energy that entered Yuan Tong's body became several times more powerful, causing a slight pained expression to appear on Yuan Tong's face. Yuan Tong was shocked and hurriedly composed himself, wanting to disperse the chaotic energy. After a long and arduous time, he finally stopped the chaotic energy from continuing to harm Yuan Tong's body. Yuan Shi could not help but pale in fright when he saw this dangerous scene. He hurriedly grabbed Yuan Tong and carefully examined him. Only after long while did he relax. He looked at Yuan Tong furiously and said, "What are you doing? Are you going to kill Lei?" "Well, I wasn't careful." Yuan Tong smiled apologetically in embarrassment. Yuan Shi was still very dissatisfied and could not help but grumble. As the couple conversed, Yuan Tong's expression had already returned to normal. He sat cross-legged with his eyes closed, slowly circulating the energy in his body to refine his body and his origin core. Although it had only taken him a few days and nights to break through to the Qi practitioner stage and form a primal core for the first time, it had been more than 100 years since he had started cultivating, and he was still in the primal core stage. He had not used his extraordinary cultivation speed to break through to the divine fire stage. After a long while, Yuan Shi finished venting his anger and asked, "Just what has shocked you so much? That should be from Lei Er's benefactor, Luo Fan, right?" Yuan Tong's expression became extremely serious at the mention of this. Yuan Tong sighed and said, "Speaking of this, you should take a look first." As he spoke, he raised his hand, and countless strange lines formed in the void, condensing into a light screen engraved with countless mysterious patterns. It suddenly condensed and rushed forward, rushing into the space between the ape's eyebrows and into her mind. Yuan Shi closed his eyes and carefully comprehended the information. His expression kept changing, as if he had opened a dye shop. How can this be? Lei Er has just found hope. Is the chaos universe going to be destroyed? After a long while, Yuan Shi cried out in shock. This is what Luo Fan said, so it can't be false. Yuan Tong sighed. The speck of light that Luo Fan had inserted into the heart-shaped artifact contained a huge amount of memories. The contents were quite similar to the speck of light that he had sent to Yu Su and Fentian, except that there was a little more information about how to use this artifact. However, because the great tribulation of the untainted land was too shocking, Ape and Thunder focused their attention on the tribulation and did not pay attention to the function of the golden heart-like magic tool. The couple discussed for a long time, but in the end, they could not come to a conclusion. In the end, it was Yuan Shi's sharp eyes that noticed the strange heart-shaped object in Yuan Lei's hand. "What is this? Why did Luo Fan send it here?" Yuan Shi asked. "Oh, this is a magic artifact called the Pattern Dao Heart. It's capable of improving one's cultivation in the Pattern Dao to the point that they're only a step away from attaining an undying body," Yuan Tong said. As he spoke, he was shocked. He finally realized how heaven-defying this artifact was. Raising one's realm. There's such an artifact. Yuan Tong's eyes lit up after the shock. Why didn't you use this artifact until now? Yuan Tong was even more direct. He snatched the small heart-shaped artifact. After injecting power into it, the artifact suddenly shook and grew from the size of a fist to 3 feet. It looked like it was the size of Yuan Shi's fist. Then, her eyes flashed as if there were countless spiritual lights flashing in them. After a long while, she was overjoyed and said, "As I thought, this artifact was clearly made for Lei Er. With this artifact, even if Lei Er's cultivation can't be raised to my level, it won't be too far off. He should be able to protect himself." With that, she did not stop. She directly raised her hand and slapped the artifact toward Yuan Lei's heart. The artifact was condensed from primordial qi. It seemed illusory yet real, and it could even be said to be an organic whole made up of 129,600 patterns. After being slapped, it sank into Yuan Lei's chest and instantly fused with his heart. At that moment, the 129,600 patterns shone with boundless golden light and spread out like countless tiny ants. They constantly moved around his heart, constantly changing. Gradually, his heart turned into a mysterious object with countless tiny golden lines engraved on it. After the golden lines covered the heart, they flickered and spread rapidly. Chapter 227. Inside Thunder Ape's body, the patterns formed by the golden lines that were produced from his heart spread all over his body. An incomparably mysterious power suddenly erupted from these lines and instantly filled every inch of Thunder Ape's body. As a result, every cell in Thunder Ape's body underwent a mysterious and indescribable change. An indescribable and mysterious aura suddenly shrouded Ape Thunder. The untraceable truth of the great Tao lifted the thick barrier of Ape Thunder a little at that moment. In an instant, Ape Thunder felt as if he had understood countless truths that he had never imagined or understood before. His cultivation realm continued to rise. He even felt that the diagram ancestral reversal technique no longer held any mysteries in front of him. The disaster crossing realm was like looking at the patterns on one's palm. It was extremely clear, as if he could cultivate it with just a thought. However, this was only a feeling. There was an indescribable power contained within his body, as if he could split mountains and seas with just a wave of his hand and destroy the world. Following the various changes in his body, a mysterious and indescribable aura gradually spread from his body, gradually spreading throughout the huge underground space. As the aura spread, Ape Thunder's cross-legged body swelled at a speed visible to the naked eye. After a short while, he had already grown to around 30,000 feet. His charmingly naive appearance caused Ape Chi's eyes to sparkle. The joy in his eyes was unimaginable. He actually succeeded. He actually reached the disaster crossing realm. Ape Chi's body continued to retreat, making way for Ape Thunder's expanding space as he constantly muttered, "Fellow Luo Fan's ability is truly inconceivable. I can't believe he was able to refine such a wondrous magic tool." Yuan Tong exclaimed in admiration as he pulled on Yuan Chi's arm. His body was also constantly being pushed back. Ape Thunder's body did not stop growing even after it grew to 30,000 feet. Instead, it continued to rise. Finally, after a few breaths' time, his body had risen to 12,960 feet before it finally came to a stop and stabilized his body. At that moment, the aura he gave off was even more powerful than the Ape Chi's. The ripples of energy caused by his thoughts spread throughout the huge underground space. This space was underground, and it was hundreds of thousands of meters wide and tens of thousands of meters tall. Although Ape Thunder had grown to a height of 12,960 feet, it only made the space slightly crowded, but it was not unable to accommodate it. Yuan Tong had cultivated an undying body, so it could be said that he had cultivated his physical body to the extreme. His body naturally possessed all sorts of wondrous abilities. At that moment, his eyes flashed, and 2 rays of golden light shot out from his eyes, instantly enveloping Thunder Ape's body. These 2 rays of golden light were extremely profound, as if they contained an indescribable mystery. That was an innate ability that was automatically produced when his body was tempered to the extreme. The fiery eyes of gold. The fiery eyes of gold possessed an unfathomable power, allowing him to see through appearances and illuminate the origin. As the fiery eyes of gold covered the area, at this time, the changes inside Ape Thunder's body appeared in his mind without any concealment. It could be seen that none of the cells in Ape Thunder's body had changed, but they were all wrapped in a huge golden pattern. These golden patterns were more than 100 times larger than his own cells. Inside the golden patterns, his own cells were like a ping-pong ball wrapped in a basketball. They seemed so insignificant, but deep in its core, they seemed so irreplaceable. These huge pattern cells were like Yuan Tong cells after he cultivated an undying body. They produced all sorts of unimaginable effects and unleashed all sorts of unimaginable power, allowing Thunder Ape to become an existence equal to the ape chi. At that moment, Thunder Ape's body, which seemed to have expanded 100 times, was completely formed by the accumulation of these patterns. Every cell in his body was the same as before. There was no strengthening at all, and there were no changes at all. Amazing craftsmanship. Amazing craftsmanship. I didn't think it could be designed like this. Yuan Tong's eyes flashed with endless light of enlightenment as he murmured. Replacing the cells with patterns was the ultimate goal of cultivating the great path of patterns. With the help of magic tools, the patterns could be wrapped around the cells, making it seem as if the cells were wearing thick armor. Controlling the cells would be controlling the patterns, allowing the patterns to unleash the various effects of the cells. This was extremely enlightening for Yuan Tong. While there were still countless principles that Yuan Tong did not understand, just this one concept alone raised Yuan Tong's understanding of the great path of patterns to another level. In fact, he had already thought of various ways to expand the great path of patterns. What's going on? Daddy, Mommy, why have you become smaller? This is fun. I want to become smaller too. Thunder Ape naturally could not maintain his state of cultivation in the face of such a huge change. He opened his eyes and looked around before laughing. As he spoke, his body suddenly shrunk rapidly. In the blink of an eye, he had shrunk to less than 12 feet tall, but he still maintained his original height of 100 times that of Yuan Chi in Yuan Tong. This is so easy, so fun. It was only then that Yuan Tong realized that his body had changed with just a thought. His eyes sparkled as he cried out in joy, his body rapidly expanding at the same time. 129 feet and 6 inches, 196 feet, 1,996 feet, 1,996 feet, 1,996 feet, and finally reached the limit of 12,960 feet before gradually shrinking again. After a long while, he managed to maintain the same level as Yuan Tong and Yuan Chi. This is so fun, Daddy, Mommy. I've caught up to you now. Yuan Tong chuckled happily. Silly child, this is just the effect of the magic tool given to you by the benefactor who taught you the cultivation method last time. Your own strength is only at the core formation stage. Didn't you notice that your Yuan core is still there? Yuan Pai said with a smile. Oh, let me see, Yuan Tong hurriedly said. As he spoke, he closed his eyes and carefully sensed his body. It seems like it's really there, but why can I do what Daddy and Mommy can do now? And I feel like I can blow this mountain apart with one punch. Yuan Tong said with some disappointment. Oomph, this is what the benefactor gave you last time, but you didn't even want to thank him. Yuan Tong said unhappily. Tong, you've said this hundreds of times. Layer just couldn't react in time last time. Next time, let Layer thank Taoist Luo Fan properly. Yuan Chi was very dissatisfied. It's because you spoiled him that he became like this. He doesn't understand human emotions and manners. Yuan Tong frowned. Layer is still young and doesn't know anything. How can you blame him for this? Yuan Chi was even more dissatisfied. Daddy, Mommy, don't quarrel. I'll thank my benefactor properly next time, Yuan Tong hurriedly said when he saw that his parents were about to quarrel. Oomph. There's no need to wait for the next time. We'll set off now and go to Buzhou Mountain to find Taoist Luo Fan. If you don't perform well, I'll tear your skin off. Yuan Tong snorted with a frown. The bit of consciousness Luo Fan had imbued in his Tao heart already contained information about his current location. That was why even though Luo Fan didn't tell them where his cave abode was last time, Yuan Tong now knew where to go to find Luo Fan. Layer, remember not to act like last time. Yuan Chi tugged on Yuan Tong's arm and reminded him. Yuan Tong nodded, but judging from his carefree manner, it was hard to tell if he took it to heart or not. Yuan Tong was once again displeased by Yuan Tong's reaction. Fortunately, he knew that there would be no end to the scolding, so he snorted and said, Let's go. There's still over 3 billion kilometers to go. It won't be good if Taoist Luo Fan gets anxious waiting if we're too slow. With that, he waved his hand. The countless patterns on the cave abode's walls abruptly lit up and flickered with mysterious light. Following that, the patterns broke away from the cave walls and shot toward the three of them. In the blink of an eye, they turned into a spherical barrier of light that enveloped the three of them. Countless patterns circled around the barrier of light, appearing extremely profound. It was like the clouds in the sky surging with the wind. Yet it was also as easy as the wind blowing through a fallen leaf as the barrier of light formed. An incredibly powerful suction force appeared out of nowhere. The endless chaotic energy in the cave abode seemed to be attracted by a black hole, gathering toward the barrier of light in a frenzy. It constantly fused with the barrier, causing the patterns on the barrier to become more and more condensed, more and more obvious, and more profound. After a while, all of the chaotic energy in the cave abode had been absorbed. The entire cave abode became clear again. Yuan Tong was an expert when it came to the transfer of chaotic energy. Didn't the two of them compress a chaotic energy source into a small ball and bury it under Yuan Tong's body for his cultivation? As all of the chaotic energy was swept away, Yuan Tong let out a cry. The spherical barrier of light suddenly trembled and shot upward. In the blink of an eye, it had crossed over 100 kilometers and rushed out of the cave abode. It paused in midair for a moment before choosing the northwest direction. It turned into a beam of mysterious light, leaving behind an afterimage hundreds of kilometers long in the air as it streaked across the sky and disappeared into the distance in the blink of an eye. While the great Tao of patterns was mysterious, it also had its drawbacks. The greatest drawback was that one couldn't fly before attaining an immortal body. While Yuan Tong and Yuan Lei had the ability to split mountains and split seas, they could only be carried by Yuan Tong if they wanted to go to Buzhou Mountain. Chapter 228. 150,000 Transcendence Luo Fan did not pay attention to what Yuan Tong and his family of three were doing with the help of the calculation scroll. For him, the result was already certain, and he did not need to spend any more energy on it. He did not pay attention to it. But when Yuan Tong and his family of three decided to come to Buzhou Mountain and set their ultimate target on Luo Fan instantly sensed their arrival under the invisible qi in the prehistoric world. There is one more member looking for experts. Presumably, there will be a lot more experts to be found. Luo Fan was secretly happy. Yuan Tong did not have the ability to fly until he attained the immortal body. But this ability came directly from his body, so it was extraordinary. His speed reached an unimaginable level. Although he was not as fast as Luo Fan, he was not any slower than Yu Su and Fentian. According to Luo Fan's estimation, it would take Yuan Tong and his family of three less than 3 days to come to Buzhou Mountain from their cave abode. During these 3 days, Luo Fan would not foolishly wait here. Not only did he need to study the method of rebirth from a single drop of blood, but he also remembered that there were some other things that he needed to pay attention to. With a thought, he raised his hand and waved. The limitless void palace in the depths of the liquefied primordial chi sea had already spun and rushed out of the sea. With a turn, it turned into a fist-sized square palace and instantly flew into his hand. Stroking the jade-like body of the limitless void palace, Luo Fan fused his mind into the limitless void palace. Through the limitless boy, who was suppressing the dimensional realm, he carefully observed the specific evolution of the limitless void palace in the past 10 periods. More than 10 periods ago, Luo Fan had set up an astonishingly powerful heavenly tribulation in the Wuji Palace. This kind of heavenly tribulation had a mysterious effect. It was a special test for martial artists and cultivators who had raised their cultivation to the peak. It was also a great opportunity for them. If a martial artist or a cultivator could overcome the heavenly tribulation he had set, they would be able to comprehend a little bit of the mysteries of space and the spirit space from the heavenly tribulation. Through the mysteries of space, it was enough for them to break through the shackles of a minor kiliacosm, shatter the void, ascend, and finally escape from the restrictions of a minor kiliacosm and enter the true great desolate world. Somewhere in the untainted world, Luo Fan had even set up a place for them to stay. He had even asked Lin Tian Nan to help them and made the turtle-shaped, innate god their protector. It could be said that he had put in a lot of effort to prepare all the conditions for their survival and cultivation. Although the starting point of the creatures in the spirit space was relatively low and their aptitudes were poor, after such a long time, there were still countless talented and intelligent people who could pass the heavenly tribulation and break through the void, although the limitless boy was used to suppress the spirit space and couldn't move at all. The limitless palace was his body after all, and the spirit space was his body after all. He was clear about every change and every evolution in the spirit space. Everything that had changed in the minor kiliocosm over the past dozen or so Yuanhui were all in its memory. There was not a single thing that was left out. At this time, Luo Fan only needed to move his mind, and he would be able to recall every change in the spirit space over the past 10 or so Yuanhui from his memory. He could even understand it more clearly than seeing it with his own eyes. Nearly 150,000 people have broken through the shackles of the spirit space. Sure enough, time is the most powerful force in the world. Luo Fan couldn't help but sigh in his heart when he saw the changes. Perhaps it was because Luo Fan had set up the heavenly tribulation to give those martial artists and cultivators hope. Therefore, the civilization in the spirit space was still a civilization of high martial artists and cultivators. Moreover, this kind of composite civilization also glowed with endless vitality, making people feel as if it would last forever. After more than 10 Yuanhui, it didn't decline, but became even more prosperous. This was truly a civilization with extremely tenacious vitality. And in such a long period of time, the various martial arts, divine skills, and cultivation methods that this civilization had developed were even an eye-opener for Luo Fan. It could even be said that he was enlightened. After all, more than 10 Yuanhui was more than 1,000,000 years. During this period, the geniuses who cultivated martial arts and cultivation methods were like the sand in the Ganges River. Among them, even if one out of thousands of people could create a new cultivation method, or if one could comprehend a trace of the mysteries of a cultivation method that no one before him had comprehended, then, when all of these things were added up, the number of cultivation methods would reach an unimaginable level. Even a fool's 1,000 thoughts would come true. Some of these were things that Luo Fan hadn't thought of or comprehended, but they were very natural. Carefully comprehending all of these wonderful ideas, Luo Fan suddenly felt that his decision to create all living beings in the spirit space was truly too wise. Luo Fan's mind and spirit's ability to process information had reached an unimaginable level. Over the past millions of years, countless talented and intelligent people had created countless cultivation methods. Although many of them allowed him to understand some of them, they were created by living beings whose cultivation level was far lower than his, so it was very easy for him to understand them. In less than half a day, Luo Fan had completely comprehended all of these cultivation methods. After comprehending all kinds of cultivation methods, he suddenly found that he could control the mini kiliocosm more flexibly and easily. All kinds of things that he could do in the past, but were quite complicated, could now be done with ease. With this unexpected gain, Luo Fan was very satisfied. With a single thought, his consciousness rose from the continent to an extremely high degree. In an instant, it had already entered an unimaginable place above the continent. After entering, time and space seemed to have undergone some mysterious changes. His will seemed to have broken through a thin layer of time and space barrier and entered a brand new world. It was precisely through the passage that his will had broken the void or ascended that his warriors and cultivators had used to break the void and enter the primordial world from the spirit space. Through this change, Luo Fan instantly included a world 7 billion kilometers away into his mind. It was a lake that was as huge as the ocean. It was boundless and boundless. It looked even larger than the continent of the spirit space. More than 1,000,000 years in the spirit space was only 1,000 years in the primordial world. This bit of time passed in the blink of an eye for the primordial world. Over the past 1,000 years, the continent-like island in the middle of the lake had undergone tremendous changes. As the saying went, there were hundreds of people in all shapes and sizes. Although the island was large, the 150,000 people gathered there formed a very strange society. This society spread in all directions with the mountain peak that was not in the center of the continent as the center. The mountain peak was not high, but because of the existence of the primal chaos bronze tablet that contained the mysteries of cultivation, it had become a holy land for all cultivators. Lin Tian Nan was the forerunner and the true controller of the entire continent. His status had been raised to an indescribable height. Like a teacher, like a father, like an emperor, like a lord. The creatures that had broken through the void from the small Kiliacosm all placed Lin Tian Nan in a very high position. They all respected Lin Tian Nan very much. Just as Luo fans will arrived on the island, Lin Tian Nan had set up a stone platform at the foot of the mountain and was beginning to talk about the martial way. After more than 1,000 years of cultivation, Lin Tian Nan had reached the fate-changing 4th stage. Although it seemed like he had only improved by 2 stages, his strength had undergone an earth-shattering change. His cultivation had reached a level that those who had transcended could not even imagine. Flying in the sky, burrowing into the ground, burning mountains and boiling seas were nothing to him. For the warriors and cultivators that broke the void or ascended, Lin Tian Nan had reached the fate-changing 4th stage. With such a cultivation level, Lin Tian Nan was a supreme existence that could not be defended against. Facing such a powerful forerunner, if they did not ask him for help, who else could they ask for help? Watching Lin Tian Nan talk about the martial arts that he had passed on, Luo Fan could not help but have a strange feeling. It was somewhat absurd, but also somewhat satisfying. After looking for a while, he shifted his attention and carefully observed the 150,000 people on the island. In an instant, he had grasped the talent and cultivation state of the 150,000 people. Perhaps it was because Lin Tian Nan was a martial artist, but among the 150,000 people, almost 100,000 people practiced martial arts. Only the remaining 40,000 people continued to practice the cultivation methods that they used to achieve transcendence. Among them, the martial arts were quite systematic. They were all in the 9 stages of spirit gathering, 9 stages of fate changing, and 9 stages of sky martial arts. However, the cultivation method was not so lucky. Because Luo Fan did not create the cultivation method and left it here, he only left the foundation of cultivation in the Chaos Bronze Tablet. Thus, the cultivation method of the cultivators did not have a template to refer to. Thus, it was quite chaotic. There were all kinds of strange and different cultivation methods. I was careless. So this is the real reason. It is not because Tian Nan is a warrior. Luo Fan sighed in his heart. The chaos in the cultivation system of the cultivators was quite fatal. Without a unified standard, it meant that the cultivators did not know what the road ahead of them was. They were hesitant and could not advance bravely. If this continued for a long time, the cultivators would definitely decline. In the future, they might even be replaced by warriors. This was not what Luo Fan wanted. Chapter 229, Primordial Soul Stage. Martial scripture condensation. There were countless wonderful methods in Luo Fan's memory. With the help of cultivators' cultivation methods and their body's aptitude, it was extremely simple for him to create a cultivation method system for cultivators. With a slight thought, Luo Fan's mind moved, and countless ideas flashed through his mind. In the blink of an eye, a standard cultivation technique had already been formed in his mind, explaining the cultivation system clearly and clearly. This cultivation technique cultivated the primordial soul Great Tao. This was a cultivation technique that was comprehended from the primordial soul scroll of the Tao fruit Great Tao scripture. This cultivation technique used ordinary people as a starting point, cultivating their souls alone, using the boundless yuan qi in the outside world to refine and strengthen their souls. Gradually, they would abandon the physical body of a living creature and eventually transformed their souls into primordial soul, obtaining immortality and possessing unimaginable power. This cultivation technique was different from the primordial soul great Tao that Fentian cultivated. Although they were both primordial souls, it completely abandoned the physical body and only cultivated the primordial soul. In the end, it made the primordial soul strong enough and had an unparalleled degree of compatibility with the heaven and earth. It was forcefully entrusted to the heaven and earth and reached a state where the heaven and earth were not destroyed and the primordial soul would not perish. This cultivation system, compared to Fentian's primordial soul great Tao, was indeed a brave and vigorous progress at the beginning. However, after the primordial soul was formed, the progress was countless times slower. Moreover, the path was filled with twists and turns, and it seemed to be much worse than Fentian's primordial soul great Tao. However, this did not mean that the cultivation technique was bad. Instead, this cultivation technique was the most suitable cultivation technique for cultivators who had ascended from the lesser kiliacosm. This was because the nature of these cultivators and their natural endowments were far inferior to the innate gods. They were far inferior to the natural endowments of Fun Tian's primordial soul great Tao. If they were to directly cultivate Fun Tian's primordial soul great Tao, it was more likely that they would not even be able to touch the door. Even if there were some talented and intelligent cultivators with excellent natural endowments who could force their way through, the speed of their improvement would be unbelievably slow, far inferior to the innate gods, although they would be extremely powerful after cultivating it. However, it was more likely that they would have exhausted their lifespan and perished before they could cultivate it. Moreover, even if they had a great opportunity to cultivate their primordial spirits, they would still have to spend a lot of energy to first refine their bodies and upgrade their bodies to the innate deity realm before they could continue to improve. That was a huge project. With all these conditions combined, it was better to just abandon his physical body and focus on cultivating his soul. Refine essence into chi, refine chi into spirit, refine spirit into void, refine void into Tao. These were the four great realms of cultivation in the minor kiliacosm. That was already close to the essence of the primordial soul cultivation path. Luo Fan was too lazy to think of other names to describe the cultivation realm of the essence soul. He divided the primordial spirit cultivation system that he had created into four major realms. They were also refining energy into chi, refining energy into spirit, refining spirit into void, and refining void into Tao. However, compared to the four realms of the minor kiliacosm, the four realms that he had created were tens of thousands of times higher. The difference between the two was like the difference between heaven and earth. With this cultivation method, as long as one reached the consummation of refining energy into spirit, he would achieve the primordial spirit and possess the wonderful power of immortality. It was equivalent to Luo Fan's Tao fruit of the earth immortal realm. Of course, the difference between the realms was self-evident. When the refining void into Tao reached the consummation, it was equivalent to placing the primordial spirit in a certain void. In the end, the primordial spirit would not perish, and the primordial spirit would not perish. According to Luo Fan's deduction, after reaching the Tao integration realm, where the primordial spirit was placed in the void, cultivators could still continue to improve and continue to expand the void they were placed in. In the end, when the void, the primordial spirit, was placed and expanded to the entire untainted world, it would be equivalent to being omnipotent and eternal. Their power in the untainted world was comparable to that of Pangu. However, one only needed to think about the endless untainted world to know how difficult it was to achieve this step. It was probably impossible to cultivate for billions of years until the untainted world was destroyed. In terms of the future, this cultivation method could be said to be the most wonderful cultivation method that Luo Fan had created. However, it could also be called the most useless cultivation method. To say that it was wonderful meant that it pointed directly to eternity. It was useless because it had no possibility of reaching eternity. After carefully savoring the cultivation system that this cultivation method revealed, Luo Fan named this cultivation method the 4 realms of the primordial spirit. Among them, each realm was divided into 36 realms. They were compatible with the requirements of the restrictions for Dharma artifacts to become Dharma treasures. They were based on the essence of the transformation of Dharma artifacts into Dharma treasures. In this way, the 72nd realm was perfected and one would reach the realm of immortality. The 144th realm was perfected and one would reach the fruit of immortality. With a slight movement of his heart, Luo Fan used the various mysteries of the way of illusion that he had comprehended from the boundless sea of blood. With a turn of his mind, he created an invisible illusion. With a turn of his mind, it emitted an endless suction force that sucked Lin Tian Nan's soul into this illusion. Lin Tian Nan was originally talking about how a warrior could use the martial way to create an illusion. Suddenly, he realized that he had entered a different world. He was shocked and put his guard up. However, when he looked around, he realized that this illusion was so familiar that it had been engraved into the depths of his soul. It was the Lin family manor that he had lived in for thousands of years. The master that he had missed for a long time was standing in the training field of this manor, waiting for him. With a thought, he understood that this was the summons of his master. He did not dare to be negligent and let go of his guard. He hurriedly went forward to pay his respects and said, "Disciple Tian Nan pays his respects to Master. May Master live a long life." Luo Fan smiled and raised his hand. An invisible force appeared and directly acted on Lin Tian Nan's body, lifting him up. He said, "No need to be so courteous. You have done well these days. You have indeed carried forward the way of martial arts. Even if I were to do it, I am afraid I would only be able to do so. I am very satisfied. Many thanks for Master's praise. Disciple will do his best until the day I die." Lin Tian Nan was very excited after receiving Luo Fan's praise. Luo Fan comforted him again. Lin Tian Nan happily stabilized his emotions. "This time, I called you here because of a big matter." Seeing that Lin Tian Nan's emotions had stabilized, Luo Fan said. Hearing this, Lin Tian Nan hurriedly said, "If Master has any orders, Tian Nan will obey them. This matter is very troublesome, but it is related to the safety of the ancient wasteland. With your current cultivation level, you do not need to worry about it. You only need to cultivate seriously and quickly change your fate. In addition, in the future, you need to nurture more people who have transcended so that their cultivation levels can increase to the maximum." Luo Fan said. Lin Tianen knew that Luo Fan had not finished speaking. He nodded, but did not dare to interrupt. "It is a pity that there are no cultivators who have the qualifications to meet my requirements. I am not willing to accept disciples casually. Therefore, I am unable to let one person control the cultivators like you do. Moreover, I am unable to make the cultivation techniques of the cultivators form their own system. Because of the urgency of the matter, I cannot wait for the cultivation technique system of the cultivators to form. I have the Primordial Soul 4 Realms method here. You can pass it down so that the cultivators have something to rely on, so that they do not take the wrong path." Luo Fan waved his hand, and a thick book appeared in his hand. It was as thick as a Chinese dictionary. It was more than 1,000 pages long and appeared in front of Lin Tiannan. When Lin Tiannan saw this book, he saw the 4 words Primordial Soul 4 Realms on the cover of the book. It continuously emitted a mysterious and wonderful aura. Lin Tiannan could not help but feel indescribably happy. As for those cultivators, he did not feel repulsed because their cultivation techniques were different from his own. To him, these were all his descendants. They were the only people he was familiar with in the lonely ancient wasteland. Therefore, he naturally hoped that they would live well and that their future would be bright. However, because he practiced martial arts, his understanding of cultivation was not even comparable to the geniuses among the cultivators. How could he be of much help to the cultivators? Therefore, in these years, he had seen the chaotic state of the cultivation system of the cultivators. He was anxious. Now that he heard Luo Fan's words, he knew that there was a solution. Naturally, he was overjoyed. After bowing and thanking Luo Fan, he raised his hand and received the book. It was heavy in his hand, and there was a surging aura emitting from it. It was as if it was evolving into an infinite path. This matter is over. I will leave. In the future, you must cultivate well. Do not slack off. Luo Fan said when he saw Lin Tian Nan receive the book. When Lin Tian Nan heard this, he became very anxious. He did not care about the primordial soul 4 realms and quickly said, "Disciple has not seen Master in a long time and has many questions. I beg Master to be merciful." Luo Fan thought for a while, leaving Lin Tian Nan alone to figure things out while he, as the Master, did not care about it was indeed a bit unreasonable. However, it was impossible for him to stay here and answer Lin Tian Nan's questions. Questions that had been accumulated for thousands of years could not be answered in a day or two. Staying here to answer questions was a waste of time. With a thought, he said, "That's fine. I will organize my own martial arts knowledge into a martial scripture. If you have any questions, just ask them yourself." As he said this, he touched the space between his eyebrows, and a large amount of spiritual light rushed out. Within this large amount of spiritual light, countless lights flickered. They continuously condensed, twisted, and reorganized. In the blink of an eye, they condensed into a huge book that was tens of thousands of pages thick. On the cover of this book, there were 2 big words that contained endless mysteries: the way of martial. After this book was formed, it emitted millions of rays of light. At the same time, a wave of extremely pure, true meaning of martial arts emanated from it and filled the heavens and earth. It made Lin Tian Nan feel that he had never been so close to the way of martial arts. He had never been so close to the way of martial arts. This was the martial scripture that Luo Fan had taken from the Book of the Way of the Way and condensed it into a martial scripture. Chapter 230. The limit of the martial scripture, transmission of the primordial spirit. Lin Tian Nan stared at the words, "martial way," on the cover of the martial scripture. His face became engrossed, and his mind gradually became absent-minded. In his senses, these 2 complex and profound characters contained boundless profundities of the great Tao of martial arts. The more Lin Tian Nan observed these 2 words, the more he understood the mysteries within, and the more he felt that he had gained something. By the time the martial scripture floated in front of Lin Tian Nan, he had already sunk into a hazy state of enlightenment where there was no one else and no me. In an instant, the 2 complex and mysterious words on the cover of the martial scripture underwent a huge change in his eyes. Every line and stroke contained in those words seemed to have come to life. Even the twist of every line, the change in thickness of every line, and the structure of every word seemed to be constantly changing, as if they were evolving into some kind of unfathomable mystery. In this process of constant change, these lines and murals were like figures continuously practicing all kinds of indescribably wonderful and exquisite fist techniques, palm techniques, finger techniques, movement techniques, leg techniques, blade techniques, and sword techniques that were incomparably in line with the principles of martial arts. After an unknown amount of time, Lin Tian Nan suddenly felt an indescribable joy in his heart. He awoke from that state of enlightenment. At this moment, he knew that he had achieved a breakthrough in his cultivation realm. The life-changing 4th realm that he had been unable to break through for hundreds of years had been broken through. All he needed was a period of time to absorb energy to nourish his body. Then, he would truly be able to step into the life-changing 5th realm. His strength would be much stronger than before. In his joy, he wanted to thank his master. However, when he came back to his senses, he realized that he had already left the manor. He had arrived at a blurry place that seemed to exist and not exist at the same time. The martial scripture was currently floating 3 feet above his head, emitting millions of rays of light that enveloped his body. He felt as if there was some kind of information constantly entering and exiting his body, as if it was communicating with him in some mysterious way. As for the primordial soul four realms, it was floating in front of him, just within his reach. Among them, although both of them looked like books, there was no difference between them. However, the feeling it gave off was completely different. Although the primordial soul four realms exuded a mystical aura, one could tell at a glance that it was an inanimate object. It was just a medium that recorded words, techniques, and information. As for the martial scripture that floated above his head, it was like a living thing, lively and vigorous, as if it was some kind of mysterious and indescribable creature, a kind of condensation of intelligence. The difference between the two could be seen at a glance. "This is my Niwen palace." Lin Tan Nan looked around and sensed his body, which seemed to be both real and illusory, and came to a realization. When he realized this, he couldn't help but feel regret. He regretted being so rude in front of his master. He actually fell into a state of comprehending the martial Tao and didn't even see his master leave. He regretted it for a long time before he recovered. He knew that what had been done could not be undone. He could only ask for forgiveness when they met again in the future, although he also knew that Luo Fan would not take this matter to heart as he thought about it. His curiosity was piqued again. He raised his hand and waved. The martial scripture that was floating above his head, emitting millions of rays of light, fell into his hand. When the martial scripture was in his hand, he felt as if he had obtained some kind of Tao from the dark. The tentacles seemed to be extremely heavy, but also extremely light. This object seemed to be extremely sturdy, but also seemed to be extremely fragile. It seemed to be extremely stable, but also seemed to be able to change millions of times in an instant. With a thought, he wanted to open this martial scripture. At this moment, an emotionless voice suddenly reverberated through the entire Niwen Palace. It was incomparably majestic and high above, like the voice of the Tao. If you have any questions, just ask. I am a condensation of martial arts wisdom, not a normal book. There is no need to flip through it. When Lin Tian Nan heard this, he knew that this voice came from the mysterious martial scripture in his hand. An indescribable feeling of shock suddenly appeared in his heart. The existence of this martial scripture had already far exceeded his imagination. However, when he thought about how this was taught by his master, he felt that it was only natural. Dare I ask the martial scripture, what is martial arts wisdom? He did not hesitate and directly asked his question. Martial arts wisdom is the condensation of countless martial arts techniques, countless martial arts knowledge, countless martial arts comprehension, and countless martial arts experience. Because the amount of information is too large, you cannot handle it. Therefore, you can only condense it into one body, becoming an existence with incomplete spiritual knowledge. This is martial arts wisdom. The emotionless yet majestic voice continued to emit from the martial scripture. Following this voice, the martial scripture suddenly floated up and once again arrived 3 feet above Lin Tiannan's head. It continued to emit millions of rays of light from its body, enveloping Lin Tiannan. What if I cannot find the answer to my question? Lin Tiannan muttered and asked. The martial scripture can be deduced by itself. When Lin Tiannan heard this, he could not help but relax. He casually asked the martial scripture a few questions that he had pondered for thousands of years, but could not find the answer to. This martial scripture did not hesitate. In a few moments, it had already clearly explained the questions that Lin Tiannan had pondered for a long time. It even borrowed the power of billions of specks of light to display the mysteries in front of Lin Tiannan, explaining it to Lin Tiannan vividly. During this entire process, it was as if the deepest mysteries of the martial way were being revealed in front of Lin Tiannan's eyes. Lin Tiannan became more and more excited as he listened. He felt as if countless insights were flashing in his mind, continuously deepening his understanding of the martial way. With this martial scripture, it's practically equivalent to a master residing in the Niwen. After Wu Jing had solved all of his problems, Lin Tiannan's face revealed an expression of satisfaction, gratitude, and admiration. He was full of ambition because with this martial scripture, his future progress in cultivation could be said to be greatly accelerated, and he could look forward to the great Tao. As for gratitude and admiration, it was because Luo Fan was willing to impart this martial scripture to him. Just as Lin Tian Nan was about to leave the Niwen Palace, the martial scripture suddenly opened its mouth without waiting for Lin Tian Nan to ask, in order to prevent the host from relying too much on this martial scripture and causing his ability to comprehend martial arts to degenerate. This martial scripture has decided to give the host a solution to a martial arts problem every 10 years. Usually, they only point out their weaknesses and don't answer their questions. One every 10 years. When Lin Tian Nan heard this, he couldn't help but cry out miserably. His heart was filled with regret. He regretted that his reaction was too slow. In these thousands of years, the problems that Lin Tian Nan had encountered were far more than the previous ones. At this moment, there were probably more than 100 problems in his heart. If he had to solve one problem every 10 years, how long would he have to wait before he could completely solve all of these problems? Moreover, in the process of cultivation, he would often encounter problems. If the old problems were not solved and new problems were born, wouldn't this continue forever without a solution? Don't be like this. One every 10 years is too little. Let's discuss, why don't we solve 10 problems every year? How about 5 a year? Still not enough. Is 1 okay? At this moment, Lin Tian Nan didn't dare to have any thoughts of leaving. He turned around and bowed to the martial scripture. However, the martial scripture only emitted a faint light and floated up and down, no longer making any sound. Lin Tian Nan bitterly begged for a long time, but to no avail. Finally, he knew that this thing had a heart of stone. Begging was useless. He could only sigh as he left the Niwen. In a trance, he felt as if he had returned to his own body. The surging vital qi in his body gave him a strong sense of security. The feeling of emptiness from breaking through to the 5th tier of life-changing realm made him want to absorb all the energy in his body to replenish his vital qi. Although he didn't know how long he had been in the fantasy world by Luo Fan and how long he had stayed in the Niwen, because of the difference in time between his consciousness and reality, only an hour had passed in reality. Lin Tian Nan's lecture lasted for more than a day or two. He stayed on the stage for an hour, and the audience thought that he was enlightened. This was normal, but no one was surprised. After leaving the Niwen Palace, Lin Tian Nan gradually calmed down and began to rationally think about the effects of the 10 years rule. After thinking about it, he couldn't help but admit that the martial scripture's methods were brilliant. With such a limit, Lin Tian Nan knew how precious the questions were. Thus, he didn't dare to casually ask questions. Under these circumstances, Lin Tian Nan had to think about every question countless times and spend a lot of energy to find the answer before he dared to ask. This way, Lin Tian Nan wouldn't become dependent on the martial scripture and wouldn't affect his ability to comprehend martial arts. If he also pointed out Lin Tian Nan's weaknesses, he would be able to completely control Lin Tian Nan's direction. This would allow him to avoid many detours on the path of martial arts. It could be said to be quite brilliant. As he sighed in admiration in his heart, the sliver of resentment that had arisen from being restricted completely disappeared. After the resentment disappeared, Lin Tian Nan's mind became clear again. Only now did he remember that Luo Fan had given him the Primordial Soul 4 realms, which was the future of all true cultivators. With a move of his heart, the Primordial Soul 4 realms that was floating in his Niwen appeared in his hands. This book was directly created by Luo Fan from the fantasy world. It seemed to be illusory and real at the same time, as if it had been created out of thin air. It contained endless mysteries. When he touched it, it felt extremely heavy, but it also felt extremely light. He couldn't tell what material it was made of, but one look was enough to know that it wasn't ordinary. This Primordial Soul 4 realms was passed down by my master. It is a wondrous cultivation method for true cultivators. Fellow cultivators, if you're interested, you can come take a look. Lin Tian, Nan said as he gathered his true energy in his throat. Chapter 231. Xuanji's Awakening. The key to proving Dao Luo Fan's consciousness had already returned to his main body on Buzhou Mountain through the minor thousand-world ascension passage. As for how Lin Tian Nan was going to spread the four realms of the primordial spirit and reverse the chaos in the cultivation system of cultivators, it was none of his business. If Lin Tian Nan could not even handle such a small matter, then Luo Fan did not need to spend too much effort on him. At this moment, Yuan Tong and Yuan Qi's family of three had only just started. They were still more than 3 billion kilometers away from Buzhou Mountain. Just as Luo Fan's consciousness returned to his main body, a very strange and mysterious aura was suddenly emitted from the dark green robe on his body. This strange and mysterious aura was like a person suddenly waking up from a dream, slowly opening his eyes and stretching his body. It was like an inanimate object suddenly gaining boundless vitality. So comfortable, so comfortable. A very young female voice suddenly echoed in Luo Fan's mind. Luo Fan frowned. He already understood that this was the voice of the Xuanji child. After more than 100 years, the Xuanji child had finally digested the endless earth fiend absorbed underground. At this moment, he had already woken up from his deep sleep. Master, Xuanji is at least twice as strong as before. I can definitely help Master now. The Xuanji child paused for a moment, then cried out in joy in Luo Fan's mind. Luo Fan's heart skipped a beat. He carefully felt the dark green Xuanji robe draped over his body. In an instant, he sensed that after the Xuanji child had digested the earth fiend after sleeping for more than 100 years, the Xuanji robe was at least twice as strong as before. Moreover, the strength was not only twice as strong as before, but it also gave the Xuanji robe a certain kind of power that could harm the spirit and increase the Xuanji robe's offensive power. Not bad, not bad. Continue to absorb the primordial spirit of chaos and strengthen yourself. Luo Fan could not be bothered with the Xuanji child and directly ordered, "No, Master, I just woke up from my deep sleep, and now I want to absorb power again. I don't want. The Xuanji child condensed a lowly figure in Luo Fan's mind. She bounced up and down, acting coquettishly, and refused. How could she reject Luo Fan's orders? He raised his hand and pointed. A top-grade lowly appeared out of thin air from the dark green robe he was wearing. With a violent jolt, he threw her into the primal chaos chi ocean below. She sank into the depths of the ocean. If you're bored, you can look for the limitless boy to chat. Luo Fan faintly transmitted his thoughts over. What a cruel master. Although the Xuanji child complained, he was after all only one of Luo Fan's magic treasures. He could occasionally resist verbally, but how could he really resist Luo Fan with his actions? Therefore, he could only leave this grumble in Luo Fan's mind before entering the endless liquid primordial spirit of chaos and working hard to absorb the primordial spirit of chaos to strengthen himself. The treasure spirit of a magic treasure and the body of the magic treasure were 1 and 2, and 2 and 1. The strengthening of the treasure spirit would naturally be reflected in the body of the magic treasure. And the strengthening of the body of the magic treasure would also have an effect on the treasure spirit. Precisely because of this, Luo Fan did not need to take off the Xuanji robe and sink into the liquid primordial spirit of chaos. He only needed the Xuanji child to enter and continuously absorb power, and it would be enough to strengthen the Xuanji robe. This was the same reason as when Luo Fan perfected his mini Kiliacosm. The Wuji child improvement was due to the perfection of his mini Kiliacosm. It was just that the effect was reversed. There's really someone here. Are you Brother Wuji? Faintly, Luo Fan could hear the Xuanji child speaking to the Wuji child inside the Wuji palace. This made Luo Fan's face show a faint smile. Shaking his head, he expelled the voice of the Xuanji child from his mind and focused his mind on the mini Kiliacosm. This time, he wanted to understand the situation of the inextinguishable natural spiritual light. In other words, he wanted to pay attention to Luo Ho's experience over the years. Since the last time Luo Fan and Luo Ho made the bet, more than 1 million years had passed in the mini-kiliocosm. And because of the existence of water and fire, because of the entanglement of water and fire, Luo Ho almost never lived long. Almost every 30 years, he would complete a reincarnation of life and death. Counting carefully, since the bet was made, Luo Ho had completed nearly 60,000 reincarnations of life and death. Moreover, it was a magnificent and infinitely wonderful 60,000 reincarnations of life and death. In these 60,000 reincarnations of life and death, they had almost tried all the reasons, processes, and results that could be used to fight at least once. The hatred of killing one's father or stealing one's wife was just the simplest and crudest kind. Most of them were like turning good friends against each other because of a steam bun or fighting to the death because of a misunderstanding. These kinds of seemingly ridiculous but more likely hatred, watching the fight between the two sides for more than 60,000 reincarnations of life and death, was like watching a movie about how a conflict could evolve into hatred. He carefully observed the inextinguishable natural spiritual light. However, Luo Fan found that after going through so many reincarnations of life and death, the mark of his life had gradually shown signs of merging with the inextinguishable natural spiritual light. Although there was still a long way to go before the real fusion, it was, after all, a good beginning. And this meant that Luo Fan's calculation was correct. This inextinguishable natural spiritual light could really be subdued by him in this way. After carefully observing it, Luo Fan had already understood the cultivation state of Luo Ho's Tao proving through dreams. Tao proving through dreams was a method that Luo Fan had specially created for Luo Ho. This method pointed directly to the fruit of the earthly immortal Tao and contained infinite mysteries. It was to construct a world in the dream, play the role of all living beings, and then use the various forms of living beings to comprehend the mysteries of the great Tao. It could not be achieved without great wisdom and perseverance. The flow of time in the dream world was the flow of time in the mind, which was very different from the outside world. Although more than 1 million years had passed in the spirit space since the bet was made, for Luo Ho, these more than 1 million years had no meaning at all. If he had enough understanding of the mysteries of the cultivation method, perhaps a moment in the outside world could pass millions of years in the dream world. But if he persisted in going the wrong way, then even if 1 million years had passed in the outside world, it would only be a moment for him. And in the more than 1 million years that he had experienced before, only a few years had passed in Luo Ho's dream world. This was not because Luo Ho's aptitude was too poor or his realm was too low, but this was the essence of the Tao proving through dreams. Proving through dreams, one could incarnate into billions of living beings, experience the various forms of the world, and comprehend the mysteries of the great Tao. This was said to be very simple, but in reality, the difficulty had reached an unimaginable level. Even if one had great wisdom and perseverance, if one did not know the method, it would be difficult to play the role of billions of living beings at the same time. And the Tao proving through dreams, through all kinds of mysterious transformations, allowed living beings to play the role of billions of living beings. And then through the operation of the cultivation method, with the help of the mysterious space-time attribute of the mind, the living beings that were played at different times and different space-time were combined together, forming a complete world. Therefore, the cultivation of the Tao, proving through dreams, was constantly developing, from difficulty to ease. At first, perhaps 1 million years was equivalent to a few years. But if one had enough cultivation, they could instantly split into billions of thoughts, and in one moment could become millions of years. The current Luo Ho was obviously at the beginning stage, the stage where he was training his mind and could only act several times at the same time. The reincarnation cycle of Luo Ho, water and fire, was personally controlled by Ghost King. Luo Fan's mind moved slightly. Through the memory of Ghost King, he instantly saw the process of Luo Ho's reincarnation cycle in the past million years. Fortunately, if it were not for water and fire, I'm afraid that there would be another Luo Ho. After seeing the process of Luo Ho's reincarnation, Luo Fan could not help but feel lucky. Luo Ho was transformed from a bit of Luo Fan's divine soul and the inextinguishable divine light. It could be said that it was a part of Luo Fan and also another Luo Fan. The pursuit of transcendence, which was engraved in Luo Fan's soul, could naturally be reflected in his body. And Luo Fan's superb aptitude as an innate god was stronger than almost everyone in this small kiliacosm, which made Luo Ho's perception far exceed that of ordinary living beings in this small kiliacosm. More than 1,000,000 years, nearly 60,000 reincarnations. During almost half of these reincarnations, Luo Ho's consciousness, which existed on the surface, had already understood that this world was under the control of some power, and that this world was waiting for him to transcend. If it were not for the fight between water and fire, and if he had a few more years in these reincarnations, he would definitely be able to perceive that the power controlling this small kiliacosm came from Luo Fan, just like Luo Ho did. If it goes on like this, I will definitely be able to subdue the inextinguishable divine light after more than 30,000 years. Luo Fan calculated carefully, and he already had an understanding in his heart. This time, the calculation of the time to subdue the inextinguishable divine light was much shorter than before. The reason was that the flow of time in this small kiliacosm was twice as fast as before, but more importantly, it was because of the existence of water and fire. Because of the eternal entanglement of water and fire with Luo Ho, every life of the battle put endless pressure on the inextinguishable divine light, which forced the inextinguishable divine light and Luo Fan's soul to work together and closely combine in order to gain the upper hand in the battle with Luo Ho. Because of this, the fusion of the soul and the inextinguishable divine light became much faster than before. In addition, each reincarnation lasted an average of 30 years, which made each life seem very short, and the number of reincarnations that could be passed through in more than 30,000 years was unknown, which was why there was such an effect. After carefully calculating all the details, 3 days had already passed. On this day, a mysterious light directly rushed up to the top of Buzhou Mountain from below. There were 3 different kinds of life force in that mysterious light, and there was also a vigorous and unpredictable power surging. Chapter 232. Yuan Lei enters, and 1,000 Luo Fan's heart skipped a beat as he took a step forward. He arrived before the cave in the blink of an eye and stood there quietly, waiting for Yuan Tong's family of 3 to arrive. A short while later, Yuan Tong's family of 3 descended before Luo Fan's cave abode with a flash of mysterious light. Countless runes flickered as their figures grew to around 3 meters tall, but they were only slightly taller than Luo Fan. However, they were no longer as shocked as before. The runic barrier that had enveloped them had also turned invisible, as if Yuan Tong had used some sort of technique to absorb it into his body. The boundless chaotic qi contained within the barrier had also been absorbed into his body through some sort of method, fusing into the runes that replaced every cell in his body. However, this fusion was not the same as when one absorbed the boundless chaotic qi during cultivation to strengthen their cells and increase their strength. Instead, it was kept in its original state within the runes. It's Luo Fan's honor to have you come from afar. Luo Fan smiled at the 3 who had just appeared. You're too kind, fellow cultivator. Is this fellow Taoist Luo's cave abode? It really is a treasure place for cultivation. It's thousands of times better than my little nest. Yuan Tong had just revealed himself, and he was very surprised by his surroundings, so he couldn't help but speak in a daze. Looks like our previous efforts to collect the chaos vitality source was unnecessary, said Yuan Pai, who was standing beside him. It was clear that the chaotic qi in their previous location was far too little compared to this place. It was not a world of difference, but it was still a huge difference. Lei hurry up and thank Uncle Luo for his generosity. Are you going to be rude like last time? At that moment, Ape Tong noticed Ape Thunder staring blankly at Luo Fan from behind and furrowed his brows. Yuan Lei shuddered when he heard that, as if he was very afraid. However, he still mustered his courage and said, "Uncle Luo, thank you for teaching me your cultivation method and giving me your magic tool. Lair really likes it. Hee. You don't have to be so polite. Fellow Taoist, you don't have to be too harsh on me. I rather like such a display of my true nature, and I won't take offense in my heart," said Luo Fan with a smile. As he spoke, he had already invited the three of them into the abode. When they entered the cave, under the control of Luo Fan's mind, a few yellow-turbaned strongmen came forward to greet them. Yuan Tong and the others had never seen such a wondrous artifact before, so they were naturally full of praise for the yellow scarf warrior. After the three of them sat down, Yuan Tong did not hesitate to ask about the great calamity of the primordial universe in 30,000 years. Among them, what he was most concerned about was how large the scope of the calamity would be. If they didn't care about it, would their family of three be able to stay out of it? Thunder Ape spoke very directly. He did not care about anything else and directly asked about his inner worries, not hiding his desire to stay out of it. Luo Fan was not surprised by this, nor did he think it was too much. After all, anyone who heard about a calamity that would affect the entire primordial universe would want to stay out of it. Even Luo Fan himself had thought of various ways to avoid the calamity when he first deduced its existence. In the end, he had no other choice. The scope of the calamity was just too large, and most of it was targeted at him. He had no choice but to face it. Even he was the same, so it was only natural for Yuan Tong to have such thoughts. However, Yuan Tong's willingness to speak so straightforwardly delighted Luo Fan. He felt that Yuan Tong was straightforward and would not play any tricks, which made him feel much more at ease. Under these circumstances, Luo Fan naturally did not hide anything. He explained the scale, origin, and final impact of the calamity in detail. He even directly expressed that if they didn't care about it, their family of three would not be able to survive the calamity. Yuan Tong and Yuan Chi's expressions grew uglier and uglier as he explained. They naturally did not worry that Luo Fan would lie to them. After all, even if he did, he would not be able to keep it a secret for long. Instead, it would cause them to be unhappy when the matter came to an end. If they failed to overcome the calamity, it would instead become a new calamity. This was not something a wise person would choose. Yuan Tong helplessly asked Luo Fan, "If it really is that serious, what should we do?" Luo Fan smiled and said, "Although the calamity is troublesome, it is not impossible to overcome." He smiled and explained his necessary preparations. He bluntly said that he wanted Yuan Tong to travel around the primordial universe in search of experts to overcome the calamity together. When Luo Fan spoke of this request, Yuan Tong truly understood why Luo Fan had given the diagram of the Heart of Wei to Yuan Lei. It was clearly so that he would not have to worry about the future. However, he did not care too much. After all, it was certain that Yuan Lei had obtained great benefits. This was something that could not be changed. No matter what Luo Fan's intentions were, he was in no position to blame Luo Fan. "I see. Since there is such a way, I will go. I will trouble you to take care of Yuan Chi and Yuan Lei for a period of time." Yuan Tong made a prompt decision and stood up. Yuan Chi hurriedly said, "I will go with you. My cultivation has reached a bottleneck. If I continue to cultivate in peace, there is no possibility of a breakthrough. It is better to train with you and find more opportunities to break through. If you leave, what will happen to Lei? You should stay and take care of him." Yuan Tong frowned. Although he had been yelling at Ape Thunder, there was no need to say more about his love and care for the ape. Even a fool could see that. Now that he heard that the ape was going to leave, he was naturally unwilling to leave the ape alone. Even if he was safe, he would still feel lonely. Right now, Lair needs to cultivate in peace. Besides, with this Taoist heart pattern, there is no need to worry about his safety. If I stay here, I will only distract him and affect his cultivation. It'll affect his cultivation. Yuan Chi was reluctant to part with his son, but he was even more reluctant to part with Yuan Tong. "Daddy, Mommy, where are you going? I want to go too." Although Thunder Ape still had the temperament of a child, he could still see such an obvious situation, so he shouted from the side. "Don't go. Look at me. I'm going to invite an expert. There is no need to bring a family with me." "What a joke." Yuan Tong raised his eyebrows and angrily rebuked this. Sensing Yuan Tong's determination and dissatisfaction, Yuan Lei's mouth twitched, but he did not dare to say anything else. Yuan Shi knew that once Yuan Lei opened his mouth, there was no turning back. He could only sulk helplessly at the side. Luo Fan watched from the side and couldn't help but smile. He said, "You two husband and wife can go by yourselves. I have a good place for Yuan Lei to play. It's safe and interesting there, so you two fellow Taoists don't have to worry." "Oh, where's safe and interesting? Can fellow Taoist enlighten me?" Yuan Tong was shocked when he heard this, and he hurriedly asked. Luo Fan slightly smiled, raised his hand, and the limitless void palace suddenly appeared in front of him. With a spin, it expanded into a square palace that was 30 meters long. Strangely, it did not give off the feeling of being unable to contain the cave. The infinite void palace. Yuan Tong looked at the palace and read the plaque on the palace's front door. His expression was very interesting. There was shock, disbelief, and even more admiration. It was obvious that he had seen through the profundities of the limitless void palace. "There's a minor chiliocosm that I've opened up here. There are countless creatures inside. Fellow Taoists, you can follow me to take a look first. You'll know what's interesting and what's safe inside," Luo Fan said with a smile. With that, he waved his hand, and the palace's door suddenly opened. A faintly discernible vitality seeped out from within. Luo Fan turned around and stepped onto the palace's door. He made an inviting gesture to Yuan Tong and the other two. Yuan Tong and Yuan Qi looked at each other and nodded. Needless to say, Yuan Lei was already eager to give it a try. If the two hadn't nodded, he would have already pounced forward. Seeing the two nod, he couldn't help but shout, "What an interesting treasure! I want to go." "Thank you, Uncle Luo." With that, he pounced forward into the palace. Yuan Lei and Yuan Qi couldn't help but smile wryly. They bowed to Luo Fan and stepped into the palace. A spacious hall was revealed after they entered. Looking at the massive hall, Yuan Tong and the other two felt like they were primitive people looking at a modern city. Everything was novel and incomprehensible. When had the three of them ever seen such an exquisite and profound method of opening up space? Although this place was still not the same world and was still somewhat different from what Luo Fan had described, it was enough to make them feel that this trip was worthwhile and eye-opening. Yuan Lei was even more lively. He walked around, touching things here and there. This is an incomplete dimensional realm. The entrance to the Lesser Thousand Realm is up ahead. Please. Luo Fan smiled. With that, he took a few steps forward and arrived in front of the door at the center of the hall. Yuan Tong and the other two followed behind him and arrived in front of the door. Luo Fan smiled faintly and stepped into the door first. He passed through some mysterious space-time barrier and entered a boundless Lesser Thousand Realm. As he stepped in, Yuan Tong and the other two followed behind him and entered the Lesser Thousand Realm. If the three of them had only been shocked by the dimensional realm before and could still maintain their rationality, then their eyes were now filled with pure shock. The three of them had their mouths wide open and their expressions blank. The energy fluctuations within their bodies were almost uncontrollable, and they emitted a powerful aura that spread in all directions. A complete world, a boundless world with boundless starry skies above, boundless continents below, and countless living beings above appeared in front of them. This is a Lesser Thousand Realm? This place is all for me to play with. The first sentence was Yuan Tong's, and the second was Yuan Lei's. That's right. Luo Fan smiled faintly. Chapter 233. Endless changes, rebirth from a single drop of blood. Needless to say, the final result of this matter was obvious. It was such a complete and interesting spirit space. Not to mention Yuan Lei. Even Yuan Tong and his wife had the urge to travel there for thousands or even tens of thousands of years. Therefore, After the family of three had a rough look at the mini kiliocosm and understood the specific situation of the mini kiliocosm, they directly handed Ape Thunder over to Luo Fan. The couple, wrapped in countless patterns, turned into mysterious light and flew straight towards the route Luo Fan had provided. The untainted land was so vast that even if Yusu and Fantion swept in two directions, it was impossible for them to cover every corner of the untainted land. Therefore, it was extremely easy for Luo Fan to choose a route for Yuan Lei and his wife that did not overlap with the other two. He did not even need to calculate much. Seeing the couple leave, Luo Fan's heart was slightly moved, and he thought to himself, everyone else is working hard. If I slack off, it would really be inexcusable. The flow of time in the spirit space was more than 730 times faster than in the untainted land. In this case, one day in the untainted land was equivalent to 2 years in the spirit space. If Ape Thunder were to remain in the spirit space, then by the time Ape Tong and the others returned after thousands or tens of thousands of years, Ape Thunder would have already undergone earth-shattering changes. Perhaps even the two of them would have forgotten about him. This was something Luo Fan did not wish to see. Therefore, Luo Fan gave Yuan Lei the authority to enter and leave the spirit space freely. In this way, if Yuan Lei felt bored, he could enter the spirit space to play. If he wanted to cultivate, he could leave the spirit space and come to the top of Buzhou Mountain, which had a better environment. Because the flow of time in the spirit space was extremely fast, if he did this, he could spend more time on cultivation, and he wouldn't waste time because of playfulness. If he wanted to play, one day could be used as 2 years. How could he not have enough fun? In order to avoid trouble, Luo Fan used a camouflage technique when he sent Thunder Ape into the mini kiliocosm. He let Thunder Ape transform into a human, and his strength was suppressed to the peak that the mini kiliocosm could bear. He believed that with all these restrictions, Ape Thunder would definitely not like to stay in the spirit space all the time. With a thought, Luo Fan turned his body slightly. With one step, he brought the Wuji Palace to the top of Buzhou Mountain, above the liquid primordial Qi Sea. With a toss of his hand, the limitless void palace rotated and sank into the depths of the liquefied primordial Qi Sea. At the same time, he didn't hesitate. His body shook, and he entered the spirit space inside the Wuji Palace. Sitting cross-legged on the platform in the middle of the lightning pool, he slowly closed his eyes. The illusory, earthly, immortal Tao fruit in his body began to vibrate in a mysterious and unbelievable way. Because of this, an extremely mysterious and invisible suction force was produced in his body, and it began to quickly extract the dense, chaotic energy on the platform. At the same time, countless patterns, talismans, characters, and images flashed through his mind. He was carefully decomposing and deducing the blood rebirth method of the pattern Dao, trying to find the wonderful method of the Tao fruit to realize this magical power. Time passed, and thousands of years passed in the blink of an eye. In the blink of an eye, 3,000 years had passed in the spirit space. On this day, Luo Fan, who hadn't moved in the slightest for 3,000 years and only knew how to absorb the primal chaos Yuan Qi, suddenly trembled. His two eyes, which had been closed for a long time, suddenly opened. It was as if two pitch-black and deep universes were contained within them, and in his left eye, there seemed to be a figure swaying in a trance. Then he shouted 3 times, "Change! Change! Change!" Following his 3 loud shouts, his body suddenly underwent a drastic change. In the blink of an eye, he had changed from the original born Taoism body to the body of a Pishio. In the blink of an eye, he changed into a 10,000 feet long flood dragon. And in the blink of an eye, he changed into an ape, a black bear, a white tiger, a leopard, a 9-headed lion, and so on. There were all kinds of strange shapes of different sizes, living creatures and inanimate creatures. Almost any image that could be imagined and unimaginable was revealed in his transformation. Each image only lasted for a moment, but because there were too many images, the transformation process lasted for half a day before it stopped. Although this process lasted for a long time, because of the rich changes, it didn't seem monotonous at all. After he had shown hundreds of millions of forms, he returned to the image of the born Taoism body and sat cross-legged on the platform. After his figure returned to the born Taoism body, Luo Fan couldn't help but laugh. It turns out to be so simple. It turns out to be so. It turns out to be so. He shouted loudly. The joy and satisfaction were indescribable. Along with his shout, the entire spirit space was suddenly filled with flashes of lightning and rolls of thunder, like a bolt from the blue. Even the space of the whole world began to tremble slightly with his tone. At the same time, the void of the Wuji Palace rotated, and the absorption strength that was constantly absorbing the liquefied primordial qi suddenly soared several times. As the absorption speed soared, a gray band of light zigzagged down from the sky, shrouding Luo Fan's figure, and then suddenly rushed into Luo Fan's body. It was crushed by his earthly, immortal Tao fruit, which was constantly vibrating, and all of it was filled into Luo Fan's body. After a long time, this abnormality disappeared. Luo Fan's face showed a satisfied smile, and he sat cross-legged in that position. His eyebrows suddenly twitched, and a hair detached from his scalp and floated up. The strand of hair twisted rapidly in midair and struggled crazily like a snake. Then the hair collapsed and melted, and then madly absorbed the endless primordial qi around it, and quickly changed and reorganized. After a few breaths, it had transformed into a small, thumb-sized figure of Luo Fan. This Luo Fan's expression was like that of a real Luo Fan, and besides the difference in size, it was just like the real Luo Fan. Luo Fan smiled as he observed this thumb-sized figure. With a slight thought, he felt as if he had an extra body. With a turn of his mind, the thumb-sized figure moved with his mind, and all the senses of the body flowed into his mind. After a careful observation, he already understood that this body only needed to absorb enough primordial qi to continue to expand and eventually transform into the size of his body. Become the same as himself. Rebirth from a drop of blood. This is rebirth from a drop of blood. It turns out that I only need to make a slight change in the Book of Changes. There was a flash of understanding in Luo Fan's eyes. With a thought, the thumb-sized figure suddenly collapsed and emitted boundless primordial qi. As if time was flowing in reverse, the primordial qi reformed into a strand of hair, and then it connected to Luo Fan's scalp and obediently attached itself to his jet black hair. Through these 3,000 years of incessant deduction and research, Luo Fan had finally found the method to achieve rebirth from a drop of blood. Just as he had said, this method was impossible when he didn't think of it. But if he wanted to, all he had to do was make a slight change in the Book of Changes of the Scripture of the Way. However, this seemingly simple change was actually so difficult that it had reached an unimaginable level. If he hadn't spent 3,000 years researching the profundities of rebirth from a drop of blood, if he hadn't spent a huge amount of energy to study its essence, then even if he knew that a slight change in the Book of Changes would allow him to achieve rebirth from a drop of blood, it would be absolutely impossible for him to truly understand this seemingly slight change. And it would be impossible for him to truly achieve rebirth from a drop of blood. At this moment, almost every cell in Luo Fan's body had undergone a slight and strange change. This sort of change was extremely profound and miraculous. It seemed as if every single cell contained the essence of his life. Yet it also seemed as if every single cell was the same as before. His soul and his earthly immortal Tao fruit were still the same as before in the world of his sea of consciousness and in the world of his Dantian. Yet it seemed to be contained within every single cell. It seemed as if it was able to be transferred to any cell it will through some sort of inconceivable process. This sort of feeling was boundlessly profound, and the profundities within it were unfathomable to the extreme. Even if it was Luo Fan, he was utterly unable to clearly explain the profundities within it with words. His figure shook as Luo Fan twisted his waist, and his body rose up from the ground as crackling sounds ceaselessly sounded out from within his body. This sound wasn't very loud, yet it seemed as if it contained some sort of inconceivable profundity. Yet it also seemed as if it was the boundless tune of the grand Tao that lingered in the air for 3 days without ceasing. It even seemed as if it was capable of cleansing one's heart, cleansing one's soul, and clearing away all distracting thoughts. At this moment, Luo Fan finally felt that he had complete control over this innate Taoism physique. That kind of power was omnipotent, and it could completely unleash all the power in his body. The feeling of all the divine abilities made him almost unable to wake up. This connate Taoism form was formed by him. However, it was under the control of Pangu's primordial spirit and was generated according to the secrets of Pangu's body contained in Pangu's primordial spirit. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it was born from the world and contained the boundless great Tao of Pangu. From the time his body was formed until now, Luo Fan had already spent more than 10 yuan wei. This included the time he had spent in the great desolate world plus the time he spent in the spirit space. During this period of time, he had comprehended the martial Tao and tempered his body, but no matter what, he was only able to develop a small portion of his body's power. The true power of the born Taoism aptitude had yet to be fully unleashed. With a thought, he raised his hand and made a grabbing motion. In the void, countless streams of chaotic energy were casually grabbed by him. They struggled and twisted in his hand as if they were real. With a slight force of his hand, the chaotic energy dissipated on its own. Then, he pointed with his finger, and tiny spatial cracks appeared in the void. It was as if he had pierced through them with a light poke. In this way, he displayed all sorts of incredible and wonderful abilities with every move he made.